The court ladies looked out the window, seeing the twins up to their old tricks. It was impossible to help the new governess. His Majesty's orders are not to be discussed. Meanwhile, a young girl walked with children in the park. Truthfully, it was the last lap, as they needed to get in a bit of practice today. But Rosalind didn't share her desires. Ferritin was of the same opinion. Who would trade games for studying? Clearly not them. But Sarara wouldn't give up. Her responsibility was studying, not playing in the park, so this was the last round. The truth is, if the children try hard in class, she will come up with a new, more interesting game for them. This promise won over their highnesses, so they happily went for one last round of the event. His Majesty observed all of this with his assistant, who now understood why the ruler wanted to acquire this particular governess. Helios, however, just smiled enigmatically. Overall, the man was pleased with the result of her work, as she wasn't afraid of difficulties and didn't flee at the first opportunity. Meanwhile, the game ended, and the children looked happy. But the girl wasn't exactly thrilled. She hadn't expected to be doing the same job in her new life as she had in her old one. On the other hand, she has no right to complain, as she graduated with honors from school and university. With such results, she was immediately hired to teach at a good school. Even in her free time, she advised the parents of her students. Very soon, her merits were recognized in the pedagogical community. That day, she stayed late at work, just like she usually did. Suddenly, her work computer decided to give up on her. Everything would be fine if it weren't for the report she didn't save. She didn't know what to do in this situation, as she wasn't a computer genius. Then a sharp sip of coffee and her life came to an end. But she was lucky to be reborn in a new world, in a new body, retaining memories of her past. At first, she was happy to be the only child in the Popo family, until they were brutally deceived, stripped of all land and money, burdened with a pile of debt. This event greatly shook her parents' health and well-being. At merely 15, she watched them depart this world. 54 characters. With nothing to do, Sarara began her search for a job to fill her time. But it was extremely difficult, as she did not possess magic, and in many job postings, that was a key requirement. She just couldn't give up. Debts wouldn't pay themselves, and she didn't want to end up in slavery. And if you think about it, who can teach kids better than her? In her past life, she never had enough time for private lessons, but here, she could build a fortune from this. Now we need to understand exactly what to teach children, clearly not magic and fencing. And after 3 years, she achieved a result that everyone was talking about. It wasn't easy, but in 3 years, she managed to pay off all her debts, and now she can live life to the fullest. But from time to time, she had to work for some truly vile people. They were bothering her, so the girl politely tried to rein them in. But unfortunately, the Duke was quite foolish, understanding neither hints nor plain text. So she showered him with pretty words about her daughter's future successes and presented a bill for 30 gold coins for 2 lessons a week. And that would have been the end of it. But the Duke really wanted to get under Sarara's skirt, so he was willing to pay. He raised the price for the young lady's services to a total of 120 gold coins per month. Sarara was offended by his insinuations and actions, so she decided to leave, pretending she hadn't heard anything. The Duke, however, felt he was in the right, as the impoverished aristocrat couldn't earn that much money anywhere else. But since she didn't get it the nice way, he was ready to explain it the hard way. At that moment, the girl realized she needed to run, as her refusal had enraged the Duke. But she couldn't compete with a grown man by force, so she had to lull his vigilance. And just when he thought he had won, she struck him right where it hurt the most. It was a victory, but in parting, Sarara advised the man to read an etiquette book with his daughter, saying she would learn a lot of new things. On her way home, the girl realized she should have been gentler with the Duke, but he had made her so angry that she couldn't hold back. It's good that a man won't be able to tell anyone about such disgrace, reputation, and all that. Right now, she dreamed of earning money, buying land in the capital, and living a carefree life until old age. So she went to her lesson with Edward Bennett, who stubbornly refused to learn anything at all. Letitia was trying her best to soothe her child, her face shifting from red to pale, but despite her efforts, nothing seemed to work. But it didn't look so scary, and in about a year, this boy will become gentle as silk. Truthfully, to start, I need to be alone with Edward to feel things out. 20 minutes will be enough for that. The boy's mother was very worried, but decided to trust the governess. As soon as Mom left, Edward started running and shouting in the room. It was clear that as soon as the boy's strength gave out, the girl would make her move. He had enough energy to run and shout for 5 minutes. At that moment, he wondered why the governess wasn't doing anything. Perhaps she wasn't who she claimed to be. After all, if she's a governess, she should be teaching him, not sitting idle. But she had no intention of doing that. The boy could keep running, jumping, and shouting. The boy didn't expect such a turn of events. And it's no wonder because other governesses fussed over him like he was a prince. But Sarara didn't do that, breaking the mold. It was interesting to see how Edward would handle the new situation. 5 more minutes passed, the room was quiet, and the girl decided to start packing her things. But as soon as she looked at the boy, it became clear the client was ready to learn. The result had to be cemented with a sweet bribe. The boy thought a long time, and Sarara ate the candy herself. Then she poured a pile of candies onto the table. The boy couldn't help himself and snatched a candy. The girl noticed it right away. Edward came up with a story about how a candy fell on the floor, and he picked it up. We made contact. Now we just need to enjoy some sweets together. And in the process, the boy can explain why he doesn't want to study. The thing is, the parents pressured the child every day, saying he had to study because he was the future Marquis. They can't even have a meal together or read a book without those lectures. Now the situation has become clearer, so the girl decided to approach it from a different angle, because even though her lessons are boring, there are always plenty of candies. After that, the girl went to leave, but Edward stopped her. The boy couldn't believe that Sarara refused to train him, but it was true. The girl only teaches the kids who genuinely want to learn from her. The truth is, Edward wouldn't let her go. He was curious if he could eat candies during her lessons. Sure you can. And of course it was a win. Meanwhile, Letitia tried to figure out why the room was so quiet. The woman thought that since Sarara was only 23 years old and Edward was a difficult child, all hope was lost. As soon as she stepped into the room, she immediately noticed her son, who looked quite embarrassed, holding hands with the smiling governess. After that, the boy confidently said he wanted to learn from Sarara. This was the best news for the Marquis in a long time. The lessons were now much calmer, and the boy eagerly anticipated each one that came. Letitia was thrilled with her son's success, not just in school, but in his behavior too. Sarara believed this was just the beginning, as the boy had immense potential for growth. Letitia understood this herself and was willing to pay any price to ensure it continued this way. Nevertheless, the woman had one question she wanted to ask the girl about something. She was curious about what the governess did to make her son interested in studying. The girl chose not to tell the truth, saying that she only sparked an interest that had been in the boy before. In that case, everything is fine, but Letitia also had news for Sarara. She had an audience with the emperor the other day. Many tales about Helios Sarara circulated, as every lady in the empire secretly harbored feelings for him. But that's not the point now. It all started when the Marquis, at the emperor's, began praising his son's academic and behavioral successes. The man became interested in this, as he himself had a younger brother and sister, and he was curious how Edward went from being a very unruly child to a diligent boy. Sarara concluded that Rosalind and Ferriton were quite the troublemakers, and it was true. Letitia even visited the palace about this matter. This was, in a way, a tribute, as the Marquis had spent a considerable amount of time teaching Helios. But the emperor asked the woman during their meeting how she managed to reform her son. Letitia didn't hold anything back and vividly described her talented governess in great detail. Meanwhile, the emperor was busy at the palace. It was noticeable that His Majesty was very tired. Rosalind and Ferriton were making Helios play with them again, almost until morning. Even though the man didn't get much sleep after that, he couldn't neglect the younger ones. It was already hard enough for them after their parents' death. Helios also had a hard time, and he respected his parents for their courage, as they had given birth to twins despite their age. But exactly 3 months later, they died in a train crash. At that moment, a scared assistant burst into the office. Jean was struggling with the twins and asked for help from His Majesty. They used magic to dig up all the lawns around the palace, building castles made of dirt and soil. But that wasn't enough for them, so the kids started throwing mud at each other, covering everything around. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the men were met with a picture-perfect scene, or rather, a scene of filth. The men froze, unable to believe they were also mischievous as kids, though only Jean was truly naughty. So their workload was enormous, to tidy everything up here and wash the children. The worst part is that the governess ran away, and as soon as the maids saw this, the gardeners went on strike too. At this moment, Helios prayed to the heavens for Sarara to arrive and save him from Rosalind and Ferriton. At this very moment, Sarara was attending a lesson with Countess Adriel, who had heard rumors the girl would be working at court. It was all just rumors that everyone around happily passed along to each other. Only the Countess believed it was true, since Marchioness Bennet spoke of it confidently at the last tea party. Nevertheless, Adriana understood where it was coming from. The Emperor had recently announced that he was looking for a new governess, and her background did not matter. After all, Helios is one of those wise people who first assess a person's skills, not their background or lineage. At first, many doubted him because of his age, but soon they realized he was worthy of sitting on the throne and ruling the empire. Adriana never doubted him. Such a beautiful person can't possibly be useless in any way. It was all clear with that. I would like to hear a woman's opinion about the twins. The Countess was in no hurry to open up, but then she said that Gemini and Helios were too different in character. They say that during the day they torment their servants, and at night they cry out, missing their parents. Adriel fell silent, realizing she had no right to discuss the imperial family, while Sarara should read the newspaper articles. The girl took advantage of this advice in the evening. After reading several articles, Sarara understood why the emperor was looking for her. Rosalind and Ferriton did something that nearly made her hair stand on end in shock. But those were just the opening chapters, with an erotic story about the emperor. It was too much for her psyche. How could you print a fanfic in a news publication? At that moment, someone knocked on her room door. He was a messenger with a letter that had clearly come from the imperial palace. It was personally written by Helios, who very politely asked her to become the governess for his brother and sister. Until the very end, the girl hoped this wouldn't happen, but the emperor needed her assistance. Backing out would be smart, huge risk of falling short, but her career was soaring even without such troubles. She just didn't know that refusing so easily wouldn't work out, as evidenced by the arrival of unexpected guests the very next day. Sarara let them in but was frightened, believing they would kill her right there for refusing. But nothing happened for a while, and then the guests took off their hoods, and it became clear that the emperor himself had come to her. The man decided to lean on his authority and charm. Nevertheless, he didn't want the girl to feel scared or anxious because of him. She understood what the man was getting at, so for the umpteenth time, she reiterated her reasons for refusing his offer. But Helios understood perfectly that it was all nonsense, and it was more likely that his younger children were too noisy and troublesome. This attitude was nothing new to the emperor, but he tried to explain the actions of his brother and sister. So he once again asked the girl to turn her anger into kindness and work for him. Perhaps she would have refused, but 500 gold pieces a month dramatically changed her answer. Moreover, Helios was willing to pay even more if 500 gold was not enough for her. This slightly confused the young woman, and she asked the emperor if he knew how much she earned each month. The man knew exactly how much the girl earned, but it was hard for her to work with 2 children, so he decided to double her payment. He'll be very happy when Sarara takes his brother and sister under her wing. The young woman finally agreed, but His Majesty had to wait a bit while she prepared the employment contract. However, she had no need to worry, as His Majesty's assistants had already prepared the necessary agreement themselves. The most interesting part was that the document's text was identical to her own. Helios did not comment on this, but there was a section where she always wrote down the parents' individual wishes. Therefore, the man could communicate any requests regarding the educational process that she could fulfill during working hours. It was intriguing, and Helios asked Sarara to come to him after each class with a report on the little one's progress. It would be wonderful if the girl could stay in her job for at least 6 months. It wasn't exactly difficult. What was difficult was the emperor's wish to feed and put the little ones to bed. So, she also has to take on the role of a nanny. It's a good thing she had some experience in her past life. With the emperor's wishes concluded, the governess was free to work as she saw fit, without further interference. After adding a few clauses and signing the contract, the girl handed it over to the emperor. The man also signed the papers. Soon they will have close cooperation ahead of them. The delegation was heading to the palace. Raphael worried that Sarara would run away, like all the governesses before her. Helios didn't rush to conclusions, as the Marquise's daughter wouldn't praise someone without reason. It was hopeful, but not for Raphael. He was a skeptic who would soon die of sleep deprivation. Meanwhile, at the palace, Rosalind hysterically refused to eat until Helios arrived. She didn't care what the servants thought, so she paid no mind to the fact that the contents of her plate had spilled right onto the maid. For Heli, it was nothing new, but Rosalind needs to understand that the emperor will be late today, and they will have to eat. But the girl kept screaming and sticking to her guns. When suddenly she noticed that Ferriton was calm and not being fussy. The girl was angry because her brother forgot they had to wait for Helios before eating. If they eat now, the older brother will think he doesn't need to eat with them and will stop doing it altogether. This affected the boy, and he also refused to eat his meal. At that moment, the emperor entered the hall. Helios knew the kids hadn't eaten, so he planned to feed them himself. Next to their older brother, the twins were calm, and they ate their dinner with gusto. Seeing the younger ones in good spirits, the young man informed them that they would have a new governess tomorrow. But this was bad news for the children. Rosalind started screaming and crying again, thinking her older brother would forget them and never return. Though Ferriton didn't cry out, he wept softly, wishing Helios would always be by his side. It pained the man to see his brothers and sisters' tears. The children calmed down, it was time to sleep, and Helios decided to read to them. The kids were falling asleep when Ferriton asked his sister to play tricks on the new governess so she'd leave quickly, and then they cried, because even next to Helios they missed their parents. Morning came, and Sarara couldn't understand why she'd finished that strange magazine after the Emperor's visit. The reading was captivating, I must admit, but now it was time to choose some sweets. The plus side of reading was that now she knew Rosalind loved strawberries, while Ferriton loved melons. So we decided to buy strawberry and melon chocolate for the kids. At that moment, the mothers of her wards approached her. Letitia continued to promote the girl, as she had reformed her little troublemaker. Furthermore, Sarara will now personally tutor their highnesses at the Emperor's request. The mothers were delighted, having heard of the twins' mischievous and unruly ways. At that moment, Sarara began to understand why the Emperor was willing to pay her anything. But Letitia had no doubt the girl would win them over, just as she had won over her Edward. The next day, Sarara was ready to enter her first battle, having packed a bunch of assorted odds and ends. The carriage has arrived, ready to take her to the palace. Jean had already met her at the palace. He was incredibly happy to see the new governess and hoped she had arrived safely. Then the young man introduced himself to the girl. She answered him the same way, which embarrassed the young knight. That's where the pleasantries ended, and the knight led the maiden to a special study room where the twins were to await them. The path to the room was strange. The girl hadn't expected to see so much mud. And this was the result of the twins' latest prank. Good thing the palace itself looked adequate. Truthfully, it was too quiet here, as if in a crypt. A bad feeling crept into my mind, and it was no surprise as there was no one in the room. It was hard to admit, but the kids ran away, and I needed to find out where. But the Emperor had warned Jean about this, and he missed it all. Now it's clear why the servants were gone. They were likely looking for the children. Sierra also set out on her quest to find her charges. She was confident she'd find them, as no one had ever outplayed her at hide-and-seek. The search went on for a long time, when suddenly the girl found a door ajar. But there was no one in this room either. At that moment, Ferriton pulled back the shower curtain and aimed the hose at Sararu. And there stands the girl in a puddle, her clothes drenched. It's sad that she didn't have any mana. I wonder if Ferriton at least had some fun. Her calmness puzzled the young boy deeply, as did her kindness, guiding him to stand firm with her words and support. They stepped out of the bathroom together, discussing the girl's age, as she had mentioned an unimaginable number. So the boy didn't believe her. But he was so engrossed in the matter that he walked calmly alongside Sarara. It was a temporary measure, and we urgently needed to figure out how to capture his attention, as well as find Rosalind. At that moment, a brilliant idea struck her. If she could make Ferriton laugh, he would show her where Rosalind was. So she suggested taking the boy for a ride in the cart, just like a real carriage. The boy was fired up by this idea, and it's no wonder because children in the Empire adored fast rides, albeit in carts or carriages. So Serafina asked the maids to find them a suitable cart. They brought her just the right transport. As soon as Ferriton saw him, his enthusiasm immediately started to fade away. Sarara had to persuade the boy not to turn away his sweet little nose and to try their little prank instead. But as soon as His Highness was placed in the carriage and taken away, he smiled wide, showing all 32 teeth. They were driving fast, so Ferritanu needed to hold on tighter. We rode for a long time. At one point, the girl wanted to fall and not get up again from exhaustion. But the little prince was happy, for Helios had not deceived him. The new governess was cheerful. The boy even thought that if Sarara liked Rosalind, then he wouldn't have anything against her either. But now he had to fulfill his part of the deal and hand over his sister. Ferriton didn't know what to do, because he had previously promised his sister to hide from the governess and not tell about her secret spot. Sarara noticed her ward's struggles and promised to reward him if he kept his word and stayed true to his promise. And if the prince fulfills his promise, she'll take him for a ride or think of something even more exciting. And Ferriton surrendered, saying his sister hid in the closet in the next room. First, he needed to be thanked properly for his help, and then everything else. But now we need to be quiet as mice. So there was a closet in the room, and the girl sat in it. But you see, this was just another trick, and the twins ended up pouring flour all over her head. Only good thing was Rosalind sitting on the top bunk. A girl got in there with the help of Mana. But Rosalind came down, jumping into the arms of the new governess. True, once on the floor, her first move was to punch her brother, for he broke the promise he made to her and played with a man they had planned to torment. Sarara quickly put a stop to her, saying that all their pranks and successes had to be reported to the Emperor, and threatened to tell him about the girl hitting her brother. However, if Rosalind were to fulfill 2 specific requests made by Sarara, then she would refrain from mentioning the matter to the Emperor. It was a choice without a choice, but the girl was ready to cooperate. First, Rosalind needed to apologize to Ferriton for her actions. If the girl doesn't do this, then Sarara won't give her a ride in the carriage. Then she placed the little prince inside it, skillfully tempting the little princess. The girl also wanted to ride, but she didn't understand why she had to apologize to her brother. Since she hesitated, Sarara decided to only roll Ferritada, when suddenly the princess stopped her, and then she forced herself to apologize. However, she spoke so softly that the governess had to ask her to repeat her apology in a louder voice. Although Rosalind didn't want to do it, she repeated it. This wasn't enough, so Sarara asked the girl to hug her brother as a sign of eternal friendship. Children had never done this, so they were embarrassed. Nevertheless, the princess hugged her brother, scaring him. But it wasn't right or like that. The girl felt it too and fixed herself. She even felt like sincerely apologizing to him from the heart. Ferriton accepted her apology and asked her for forgiveness too. The kids made up and Sarara was ready to give them a ride. The rides began through the palace corridors. Helios and Raphael watched this scene unfold. Evening fell, and the children had changed and were ready to go to bed. The children didn't mind if the governess read them a story. The kids fell asleep on Sarare's lap in less than half an hour. The maids looked at the girl as if she were a sorceress, because the scene was too unusual. The girls didn't want to move the children to their bedroom, because if they woke up, it would be bad. The maids were ready to bring pillows and blankets here, so that a catastrophe wouldn't happen. There was no disaster. The kids were asleep from playing too hard. The girl was curious about when twins usually go to bed. In general, it should be done by 9 at the latest. The maids didn't comment on this, but only said that the children always looked forward to their older brother's arrival. But when Helios came, he would stay with them until morning, not getting enough sleep, but comforting the little ones. The maids felt sorry for Sarara, that today had been difficult for her, but she wasn't worried about it. In the end, Sarara went to her room, but on the way she met Jean, who understood that the girl was very tired today. Her clothes were soaked, so he draped his jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm. It was embarrassing, but the girl was grateful for the care. But the workday wasn't over yet, and it was time to report to the Emperor. Meanwhile, the man was examining some documents. He was so focused that he didn't hear her call out to him the first time. But as soon as he noticed her, he chuckled a bit at her strange appearance and demeanor. Nevertheless, he composed himself and prepared to listen to her report after she took her seat. Approximately 110 characters. The Emperor sat down next to the girl, who now understood the aristocrats that were going crazy over him. The man thought he should compliment the girl and thank her for the babies. He began by acknowledging it had been a tough day, and she hadn't had time to freshen up, which he understood perfectly. The worst part was that Helios offered Sarar to use his bathing facilities. The man realized that what he said sounded ambiguous, so he suggested calling the maids, who would escort her to the bathing rooms and help with the rest. The maids immediately set about carrying out the order, but it made Sarara so uncomfortable that she eventually asked all of them to leave the bathhouse. Left alone with her thoughts, the girl felt a sense of relief wash over her. Yet, a recent conversation with the Emperor resurfaced in her mind, and she felt the urge to sink back down, having misunderstood him. After all, she'd read too many romance novels, and the Emperor couldn't fall in love with her at first sight and forever. Meanwhile, Helios remained seated in his office, deep in thought. Sarara finished her bath, entered the study, and thanked His Majesty for his kind gesture and hospitality. Now they could discuss business, and Sarara shared how the twins soaked her with water and then covered her in flour. The mischief ended there, as the girl made them learn the traditional dance of the Empire, and after the 20th repetition, they fell asleep without any trouble. It was amazing, and Helios couldn't believe the little ones were already asleep. But he was grateful to the governess for her work, noting that it had gotten colder, so he planned to bring her warm clothes, but she refused his offer outright. She wore Jean's jacket on her shoulders, and with that, Helios was ready to listen to a detailed account of the lesson. The girl emphasized in her report the dance they were teaching the children. The kids loved it so much they wanted to keep going even when tired. Morning came and the children waited for the governess in the study. But they didn't plan to listen to the governess, even after their older brother's advice. Unlike her brother, Rosalind wasn't worried that Helios would scold them, and she actually enjoyed teasing Sarara. Today, the girl planned to scare the governess with roaches. And at that moment, happy Sarara walked into the room. An awkward pause hung in the air. The girl knew the kids were up to something again, so she approached indirectly, asking if anything had happened today, but the children wouldn't confess, so she started to guess what had happened. The children denied everything, but Sarara was curious who would slip up first. Moreover, if anyone had lied to her, she would have been hurt. After all, when people lie, they run into big problems, so she is glad that the children tell the truth. Ferritin tried to gently guide his sister onto the right path, as their brother had scolded her, but Rosalind stood her ground. This was the first step, so the governess added fuel to the fire, saying that if a person lies, their nose will become very long. Kids will be kids. They were so scared they started checking the size of their noses. It was fun, but it's time to get to work. And besides, Sarara prepared a pop quiz for them. The twins didn't want to study, so they started hugging the girl to distract her attention, but they also did this in order to slip a little gift into her pocket. Sarara pulled him out without thinking. Her worst suspicions were confirmed. A cockroach had settled lazily on her palm. The kids were happy with the show from the new governess. Jean ran into the room at the girl's scream. He instantly grasped the situation from their pleased expressions. But he decided to save the educational talks for later and, for now, deal with the troublemaker. He hit the bullseye, but it didn't make Sarara feel any better. But Jean shouldn't have punished the children, as that was part of her duties. Now she was ready to go on the warpath, and to start, she sternly asked her charges if they were having fun right now. The children were silent. Sarara continued, pointing out they had lied to her 3 times. Good thing the knight hasn't left yet. He could bring a big mirror into the room. He didn't have to be asked twice. Now the children could closely examine their reflection, as their noses had started to grow because they had been telling lies. And soon they'll get so long you can catch fish in the pond without a fishing rod. Rosalind couldn't understand how this could have happened because she had lied many times before and her nose hadn't grown. Ferritin didn't shout. He was more suggestible and was convinced that his nose had grown. And since the children couldn't agree, Jean had to objectively settle their dispute. At first, the young man didn't understand what the governess wanted, but then he played along, saying the kids would break the window with their noses at this rate. Now their highnesses are gripped by panic. Because Jean and Sarara's noses were ordinary, and that's because they always tell the truth. Rosalind was indignant. She wanted to know how they could fix their noses. The doctor won't help them, but Sarara was ready to share a secret with them if the children worked hard today. As much as their highnesses wanted, they had to study. Their gloom was thick enough to be spooned, but they couldn't avoid the work if they wanted to make their noses look normal. They just needed to connect the right pictures with lines, which seemed easy. So they quickly completed the task at hand. Now Sarara was ready to check the work and assign the grades. And lo, the children did it all right. And it's not surprising, they had well-developed fine motor skills, and they were quite clever too. Now, I had to keep my word and explain how to get noses back to normal. There was one secret remedy, and that was candy. Besides, people's noses can't grow when they lie. The children couldn't believe Sarara had deceived them. But the second candy worked wonders, and the twins weren't angry. Evening had arrived, and Raphael came to Sarara to escort her to the Emperor. Because right now Jean and Helios are having a little spar. They hadn't walked for long when suddenly Raphael burst out. He was admiring the Emperor, and Sarara was agreeing, and the man thought that on this common ground they would become friends. Having brought the girl to the office, Raphael asked her to wait for the Emperor, who was running a little late. Though they poured her tea to pass the time, she wished to know how long she would be sitting there. Time passed, and the Emperor still hadn't arrived, so Sarara decided to take a look around, as the office was filled with many expensive and beautiful items. But the most valuable thing of all this splendor was the family photo. It's reasonable to assume that Helios was around 20 years old at that time, and even though he wasn't in this photo, he would have looked perfect with her. At that moment, the girl suddenly realized that the imperial family, before the tragedy, had been the happiest in the empire. Former Empress Charlotte was born into a noble family and had an impeccable reputation, while Emperor Endymion earned a reputation as a just ruler. Their union was not political or contractual. They were bound by true love at one of the celebrations in the palace. A year later, Helios was born to them. The most interesting thing is that throughout all the years of their marriage, Emperor Endymion never took a mistress. There was only room in his heart and bed for Charlotte. So the heavens rewarded them with twins. It must have been so difficult for the children to lose their parents at such a young age. Overall, there were many rumors in the Empire about that accident, and some even believed it was a contract killing. The engineer claimed that a certain beautiful woman had cast a spell on him, but those were matters of the past. Sarara understood Helios and the twins perfectly, as in her past life she had lost her parents and herself hadn't wanted to live back then. Although it was much harder for Helios than for her, as he had to not only grieve, but also raise his brother and sister and manage the empire. Knowing this, she understood why the emperor indulged his brother and sister, and that means she needs to hug her twins more, bathing them in her warmth. At that moment after training, Helios entered the office. Seeing him in all his glory, she understood why all women in the empire were crazy about him. He shone like a disco ball, happy that today he didn't have to clean the governess from flour and other mess. Now it's time to discuss today over a cup of tea together. Overall, everything went well, except for a little childish prank before the lesson started. Nevertheless, Helios wanted to know what the twins had done. The governess didn't want to escalate the situation, so she decided to change tactics, saying that Rosalind had tried very hard and caught her off guard. And then she vividly described how the girl slipped a cockroach into her pocket, and how she got scared, and how she scared Jean with her scream. The emperor was pleased that the girl was smiling as she talked about it, but he knew that the twins often went overboard with their antics, so he was worried. But it wasn't worth it. The lesson went well afterwards. The girl even conducted a test. She tested the children's knowledge and comparatively analyzed it with that of other children their age. On one hand, Helios listened intently, but on the other, he decided to tease her a bit, asking about her future plans for her own children. Quite quickly, Sarara realized what the man was doing, so she asked him not to joke and to carefully review the documents. This indicates that their highnesses are very gifted children. After that, Sarara briefed the emperor on the training plan for the near future. Besides, her program was perfect after all. It was put together by South Korea's best professors. But for now, she really wanted to ask Helios to postpone the twins' training in magic and swordsmanship. It's better to focus on the basics now and establish a trusting relationship with them, so the re-education process goes smoothly. Helios did not resist, knowing that the girl was right. A new day began, and the twins played in their room. They were pondering how to play a prank on Sarah today. They enjoyed teasing her, as her reactions were always amusing and brought them joy. She never yelled or scolded them. It seemed like she was even having fun. And besides, she's very beautiful. Faratanu actually likes Sarara a little bit, but Rosalind didn't even think about it at all. If you think about it, the girl didn't hate the governess, and in the 2 weeks, she hadn't done anything bad to her, and overall, she was trustworthy. And Sarara did many other things with interest and from the heart, so Rosalind wondered if perhaps she should stop playing pranks on her. Ferriton was just a bit afraid that if they didn't do it, one day Sarara would leave them for good. The girl understood this too, but she feared that soon Helios would forget about them, and she wanted to spend as much time as possible with her brothers. At that moment, Jean entered the room, relieved that the kids hadn't run away anywhere. The twins immediately realized their big brother wouldn't come. He was busy today, just like yesterday and the day before. Rosalind was close to tears. She was scared that Helios might not come by in the evening. But they didn't need to worry about it. Time would fly by during the lessons, only the governess was running late today. Meanwhile, the twins hatched a new plan for mischief, and for this, they needed more information about the girl. The only interesting fact that Jean knew about her was that the governess did not possess any magical abilities. She's also afraid of heights and can't ride a horse. Therefore, the twins decided to lift the girl to a height using magic and observe her reaction to the situation. At that moment, it dawned on Jean that their highnesses planned to use this information against the governess. But it was too late to cry over spilled milk. The knight would have gladly warned Sarara about the prank, but he had to leave, so he asked the children not to do anything they would regret. He understood his words would be ignored, but there was nothing more he could do. Meanwhile, Sarara had already arrived for her lesson. But as soon as she entered the room, she saw a tearful Ferriton in the corner. She was genuinely scared because Rosalind wasn't there with her brother. But as soon as the girl looked up, she saw the princess hanging from the ceiling. She was crying because she was very scared. Sarara understood that it was most likely due to the mana that had gotten out of control. Adults can easily manage the flow of mana in their bodies, but it takes time. For children, this is much more difficult to achieve. Children often misallocate it, which leads to problems with control and stability. Right now, magic has likely spiraled out of control as the twins were concocting yet another mischievous prank. But the root cause was that she was too soft with them from the very beginning. Sierra couldn't lower the girl by herself. She needed to call someone for help. Meanwhile, the twins were escalating the situation, and Rosalind felt like she was about to fall. Sarara herself was starting to get nervous, but first Ferritin had to let her go so she could call for help. But the boy wouldn't let her go, because if they called other people, Helios would find out what they had done, and would be angry with them for breaking their promise. Sarara promised not to tell the Emperor about it, but she couldn't let the princess off the hook herself. But to help the girl, it was necessary to calm Ferritin down. The prince calmed down. Now he had to assist the governess in her difficult mission. To do this, the boy needed to step aside, let her be, and not interfere. Now he had to think of a way to reach the ceiling. She didn't have any magic, so she resorted to improvised tools, and the table was just perfect for that. But the height was still insufficient, and Rosalind had to stretch considerably for Sarara to be able to grab her. After several attempts, the governess finally reached the girl at last, but their joy was short-lived. Sarara's heels gave way, and she fell with Rosalind to the floor. The fall was painful, and clearly not the most successful. But Sarara didn't worry about herself. It was important to see if Rosalind was okay. If she'd broken anything, the girl was fine, which couldn't be said for the governess. Only now did the kids realize that the girl was in pain, even though she tried to show otherwise. In reality, not only was her head aching, but it was also spinning quite a bit. It terrified the children so much that they cried and begged her not to die. It's hard to die from this. She just has trouble standing up now. Now, children need to realize that their pranks are often not harmless and can have these kinds of unpleasant consequences. Because if something had gone wrong today, and she had fallen even less fortunately, she could have died. She was about to go and tend to the wound now. While she's doing that, their highnesses should wash up and sit quietly until she returns. Meanwhile, one of the maids was helping the girl tend to her wound, which was still bleeding. It would be great to use divine power for healing right now, but no one had it. So a bandage is our everything. The mini-break quickly came to an end, and Sarara had to go to their highnesses. To everyone's surprise, the twins sat quietly, their heads down in the study room. They asked Sarara for forgiveness for their actions, understanding that they could have caused her death. How she wished to hug and comfort them, but it was still too early to do so. Rosalind first promised she would always obey Sarara from now on. Ferritin supported his sister's impulse. It was a good result that needed to be consolidated. Hugs were the best choice for this purpose, really. The children couldn't calm down at all, but Sarara believed that from this day on, they would behave well. Their eyes were swollen and sore from all the tears. Something needed to be done about this situation, so Sarara asked the maid to bring her a towel, some ice, and a glass of cold water. It was all for the children, as the girl understood that she had been strict today, but it would only benefit them. After the twins had a drink, it was time to get down to the ice. Having wrapped it in clean handkerchiefs, the girl placed it on the children's eyes. Her efforts improved the atmosphere in the room. Now it was possible to study a bit, for example, mathematics. The learning method delighted the twins. Evening came. It was time to sleep. Sarara decided to read the children a bedtime story, approximately 96 characters. It was good that the bed was moved to the study room, making it easier for the girl to put the children to sleep. Ferritin was already asleep, but Rosalind couldn't sleep. The princess was worried about what had happened that morning, but she promised she would never hurt Sarara again. The governess wasn't offended by the girl, but in the future, she'll be even more diligent in watching the twins. Hellos won't get anything out of her either. The twins really put in the work during math class today, approximately 114 characters. But she hoped the kids wouldn't pull such stunts again in the future, approximately 75 characters. With that, they finished, but Sararu still faced a talk with the Emperor, who was staring her down. The man wanted to understand what happened to her today. She couldn't tell the truth, so she lied and said she'd fallen. Perhaps that's true. The Emperor didn't deny it, but the wound looked quite painful. Sarare truly felt pain when she tried to move, so Helios decided to examine the girl's wound. Everything didn't look too bad, but the man wanted to help the girl feel better. Well, why not? After all, the Emperor possesses divine power. Moreover, his mana won't run out after just one small healing session, and as her employer, he needs to take care of the girl's health. This treatment won't take much time either. In less than 5 minutes, there was no trace of the wound on Sarara's forehead, but Helios now wanted to know what had happened to her. No matter how much the girl assured him she had fallen, he didn't believe her. I wonder if she'll tell him the truth when he gets close to her. 70 characters. But he quickly reconsidered, and the girl switched to work mode. 69 characters. She started showing the children's drawings, saying that Ferritin draws better than Rosalind, even though it's generally accepted that girls draw better. Sarara also reported that the children danced well today at the end of the lesson. At that moment, Raphael peeked into the office and announced the time. Sarara hurried home, and the aide reminded the emperor that she needed to be released before 10 o'clock in the evening. Helios, not listening to the assistant's angry speech, went over to the twins. Amazingly, after Sarara started working for him, the children began to fall asleep early, and what's more, they didn't even need him to be there anymore. Reaching the room, the emperor decided to ask the maid what happened between the governess and his young ladies that afternoon. To be honest, the maid didn't know the details, but something happened between the children and the governess for her to have gotten injured. He expected something like this, so it's good that he healed his wound with his divine power. I don't want to, but as soon as the kids wake up, I'll have to scold them so they don't do it again. But as soon as he saw the heartwarming scene in the room, his urge to argue vanished completely. Suddenly, Helios accidentally woke Ferritin but asked him to go back to sleep. But the boy wasn't swayed by the pleas. Moreover, he started to wake his sister up. And now the twins were hugging their older brother, who realized he wasn't going to get any sleep today. Suddenly, the children stepped back, and the young man didn't escalate the situation, saying that the governess had praised them today. Rosalind didn't expect that Sarara would keep her word and even praise them. The girl realized the governess was a good person, and she should be a little kinder to her. But seeing their older brother guessed their pranks, the children decided to sleep again. They wanted to hear their brother read a fairy tale, as they hadn't spent time together like this in a while. He needed to choose just one, and then, quite unexpectedly, his eyes fell upon a new book, one he hadn't seen before. It turned out that Sarara himself wrote this book for the twins. A new day began. Sarara arrived at the palace where the twins were waiting for her. Today they outdid themselves, looking just like two little puppies full of energy. And they hugged her too tightly, even though the girl was afraid that after yesterday they would start pushing her away. But everything was fine. The kids were just happy to see her and eagerly awaited her arrival. Moreover, they made the decision to study diligently and to stop teasing the governess once and for all. It was a good start to the day, and they also tried to complete their assignments in class. Today they made flowers out of paper. Not everything turned out perfectly, but Sarara was confident that the emperor would like such a gift. The girl didn't come up with this task just like that, because in her past world, on this day, children made flowers and gave them to their parents as a thank you for their care and love. The girl believed the emperor would be happy to get cards from the little ones. Inside the card, the kids had to write a few kind words to their brother. After a while, the postcards were all completely ready. Meanwhile, Helios finished signing the documents. Raphael was displeased with the emperor's zeal, as due to the frantic pace of work and lack of sleep, he would soon be off to his parents. Nevertheless, both Raphael and Jean were amazed that Helios managed to get through a week's worth of work in 3 days. But while Raphael and Helios were working in the office, Jean had to entertain their highnesses, and now he felt like a squeezed lemon, both mentally and physically. And the blame for it all lies with the wagon game, which, as Helios knew for sure, Sarara invented on her first day of work. But that wasn't so important. Jean was leading his speech to the point that if the emperor was taking a day off, he could grant him one as well. But it didn't work out. The emperor didn't give the knight a day off and went to have fun with the twins himself. Meanwhile, the kids haven't finished their classes yet. The emperor was surprised that the twins were so engrossed in something that they didn't even notice his arrival. So he decided not to waste any time and find out what they were so interested in doing. As soon as he spoke, the younger ones rushed to him, hugging him tightly. Rosalind climbed into Helios's arms, telling him that they had been playing and eagerly waiting for him, and now he could set her down on the floor. Unexpectedly, the princess had never asked to be let go before, quite the opposite. It's all because the kids couldn't wait to give their older brother a gift. After finding postcards, the kids returned to their brother. It was the most touching moment of this long, tiring day, but the kids suddenly felt scared and confused. They had rehearsed this moment so much, yet now they didn't know what to do or say. To their rescue, as always, came the governess. She said the children had prepared cards with words of gratitude, but children had to read the postcard text themselves. The twins' words struck the emperor right to the heart. He was happier than he had ever been. At that moment, Sarara suddenly realized she was admiring a man she'd already found handsome, but his smile suited him so well that her heart and cheeks went wild. Meanwhile, Helios decided to personally read the postcard's text once more. Rosalind expressed her deep affection for her younger sibling and pledged to be consistently compliant and well-behaved. Ferritin also confessed his love and thanked her for her kindness and care, but he also worried that the Emperor worked too much and rested too little. But there was still one more gift, you see, that Sarara had prepared for the young man. It was also a flower made of paper. Only Rosalind insisted that the girl attach this gift to Helios's chest without hesitation. It was unexpected, and Sarara didn't even know if he had the right to touch the Emperor at all. But Helios even prepared a spot on his cloak specifically for her gift. The gifts were all done, and everyone could continue playing together now. Only at work did Sarara find it difficult to concentrate, as she kept thinking about the moment she pinned the ribbon onto the Emperor's cloak. It felt like her heart was about to break all her ribs and then jump out to wander around the room. Meanwhile, the kids told their brother about the word game they played while waiting for him. Many board games the girl used for teaching were borrowed from her past life, helping her adapt them for lessons. But for the Emperor to grasp the game's concept, their highnesses had to explain the rules to him first. But the rules were boring, so the children showed by their own example what to do and how to do it. Rosalind gathered the first word from letters. Now Helios understood why the twins started learning more willingly, but how the governess came up with it all, he couldn't figure out. Meanwhile, the twins wanted Sarara and Helios to play the game with them too. The governess was in no hurry to do so, as she understood her position. She was a worker, not an aristocrat. The kids didn't understand her struggles, they just wanted to play together. And the governess didn't understand how to explain the difference in social statuses to the twins. Helios watched the younger ones and their governess, and decided to take matters into his own hands, saying he wanted to play with them too. So they divided into teams and started playing. In the first round, Ferritin won. Now it was the Emperor's turn to come up with a word. The children prepared to fight not for life, but for death. And the Emperor had to come up with a 10-letter word for them. Obviously, he was having fun, because only a princess could put together such a word. It's no surprise that Rosalind was the first to complete the task. In the third round, the Emperor and the governess had to make up the children's words, and a new prank came to their minds. However, Ferritin was the first to enter the game with his word. Sarara believed the boy had come up with some nasty idea, but he surprised her by choosing the word kiss. But lost in thought, she didn't notice that she and Helios had reached for the same letter, and their hands met. It was an awkward and embarrassing moment. Time seemed to stand still. The girl withdrew her hand first, but things didn't improve. Ferritin flared up. He didn't understand why Helios had given his card to Sarara, and she hadn't snatched it away when she touched it. That was wrong, after all. They were rivals. Besides, the game will become uninteresting if adults let them win. In a way, the boy was right. So Sarara promised they would play at full strength, but it didn't help, so the prince wanted to end the game. After that, the governess had no other choice but to head back home. Helios stayed with the twins, baffled by Ferritin's anger over adults ruining such a fun game. He simply didn't understand his frustration. The Emperor didn't comprehend his own feelings either. In that moment, he just wanted to give the card to the girl, but he swore never to act that way again. Rosalind observed everyone closely and drew her own conclusions from it. A new day began, and the twins explored a new fun activity. They had a set of bright stickers. The kids liked the stickers right away, and each wanted one for themselves. Today, Sarara planned to give each of them one. Sticking them on the kids' cheeks brought joy. In her past life, the girl often awarded her students similar prizes for participating in competitions or concerts. It was clear from the twins' faces that they wanted all the stickers, but they'd have to work hard to get them. If their highnesses complete the tasks from the list, they will receive more stickers as a reward. So the kids will have to either study hard or, for example, eat well and not be fussy about their food. But that's not all. The more stars the twins collect, the more they can exchange them for special rewards from the list. Ferritin was the first to read the list. The second began to study Rosalind's proposals. To motivate the children even more, the governess attached this list in the most prominent place. It worked. Rosalind started making mental plans on how to collect more stars than her brother. Ferritin thought roughly the same. Sarah never expected such a silent standoff to unfold. 2 weeks later, the competition between the twins ended with Rosalind's victory. The girl completed all tasks, slept well, and ate everything she was given. But Ferritin, in that time, was only able to collect 2 stars. While Rosalind was happy that she and her governess were going for a walk, Ferritin was almost crying in the corner. But no one was going to leave the boy alone in the room. Yes, He couldn't collect the required number of stickers, but they'll take him on the walk with Sarara. The governess was glad Rosalind asked her brother along without prompting. At the same time, Jean and Helios went for a short walk in the garden. Jean recalled how Sarara had mentioned that Rosalind had collected 20 stickers and had won a delightful outdoor excursion. The girl recently explained this very approach to the Emperor, approximately 69 characters. At first, Helios didn't believe in the effectiveness of such an approach, but now he sees that it has paid off. Once again, he was convinced that Sarara understood the hearts of twins far better than he did. Jean was also delighted with the girl, but it would have been absolutely wonderful if her social standing had been a little higher. Then she wouldn't have had to work so hard, and suitors would have lined up. For some reason, the Emperor really didn't like this. It was jealousy, but Jean misunderstood it and thought it was the illness Raphael had warned him about before. So he became overly attentive to Helios, which made her feel confused and uneasy. And to hide this somehow, the man went to see the twins. The children ran to hug him right away. They were happy that their brother took the time for them in his busy schedule. The twins bragged about their success and win in the competition. But it wasn't exactly like that, as Rosalind pointed out, which is why they were ready to fight. Syrah was colorful and fragrant, though she didn't expect to see the Emperor here in broad daylight. Noticing the governess, the children ran to her, insisting that they hadn't been fighting and that they loved each other very much. But something about it felt off, so the kids hugged to make it more convincing. This time she will believe them, but now it's time to show Helios that they know how to properly greet the Emperor. It was a sign, and the twins gladly demonstrated their knowledge of etiquette. It was the perfect greeting that truly deserved nothing but praise. At that moment, Rosalind noticed that Helios and Sarara were looking at each other strangely, completely oblivious to everyone around them. The girl's confusion didn't escape the Emperor's notice, but she denied everything. Unlike his sister, Ferritin had something to say to adults. The boy was very hungry indeed. It was truly a brilliant idea, that is, until the moment came when the twins started insisting that Helios and Sarara join them for their meals. The Emperor himself didn't mind it either, even if Raphael would grumble later. Rosalind thought it was a great chance to understand what was going on between the governess and her older brother. And after some time, they were all sitting together at one table. She understood that sooner or later something like this could happen, but when it did, she felt extremely awkward. Meanwhile, the children happily ate their little cakes and were getting ready to enjoy the adults' cakes, if they didn't want them. Seeing that Sarana didn't want to eat the dessert served, His Majesty asked her if perhaps another one should be brought. The girl felt awkward asking for anything else, so she just ate the pastry that was on her plate instead. Meanwhile, Ferritin nearly choked as he stuffed the pastry into his mouth and got a mild reprimand from the girl. This situation reminded Helios of days long past. When the boy ate messily, his mother would always wipe his mouth and gently scold him. But the Emperor had no idea that day was the last time they'd gather on the terrace as a family. The tragedy happened before the first snow fell. Right now, Sarara reminded him of his mother, taking care of Ferritin. Rosalind watched the young man intently, trying to understand why he was smiling like that. Moreover, the girl felt that the governess and her brother acted strangely whenever they were near each other. To shift the conversation, Sarara began talking about the twins' recent achievements. For example, their highnesses succeeded in learning the imperial language. Moreover, recently Rosalind and Ferritin have started sleeping in their own separate rooms. The little prince approached Helios and hinted that he might want to give them stickers for their achievements. It was interesting, but the Emperor wanted to know what the boy would like to receive for his achievements. At that moment, the boy's eyes lit up because he wanted a huge party for his birthday celebration this year. Rosalind supported the idea, eager to wear her most beautiful dress and shoes to the event, ensuring she looked stunning. The Emperor couldn't promise anything, yet he was willing to accommodate his younger brother's request. The twins wanted to have a special day with their older brother, Sarara, and friends. Helios was ready to host a tea party where the twins could invite their friends. The young man himself understood that he couldn't keep the imperial palace closed any longer. It was time to start holding celebrations and parties. So he thought a tea party was a fantastic idea, as the twins would be able to socialize much better that way. But Sarara must be at the tea party, as the children will be uncomfortable without her. The girl didn't know what the right thing to do was, but since this wasn't a formal event, she could probably participate as a nanny. The tea party will take place during her working hours, so she will gladly look after the children. At that moment, the Emperor realized that Sarara had clearly misinterpreted his invitation. Meanwhile, the children took their governess for a walk, leaving their brother behind. Evening fell, and in the palace, the maids were discussing the news of the upcoming birthday tea party for the twins. Suddenly, two girls approached Sarara and asked what kind of cake would be best to make for the tea party, and what games would interest the children. The maids also created several outfits for the twins, and they were eager to hear the young lady's opinion on this matter as well. There were too many questions, but the girl had no answers to them. Nevertheless, the day X arrived. Rosalind looked like an incredibly sweet little girl in her new dress. Sarara was delighted with the princess's appearance, for she had never seen a more beautiful girl in her life. It was the best compliment for the little princess. At that moment, Ferritin entered the room in full regalia. Sarara praised both children for their appearance and showered them with compliments. The children were happy that the governess would celebrate her birthday with them. And as for Sarara, she also had gifts for the twins. If Rosalind received a pair of sweet little shoes, then for Prince Ferritin, she presented a miniature carriage. The boy liked the gift, but he didn't know the carriage had a surprise. If you press the little button, the carriage transforms into a beautiful sword. At that moment, Jean entered the room to accompany the children to the celebration. Today, there were many peers of the twins at the palace, so the knight hoped they would have a great time together. The children left, and Sarara had a few minutes to catch her breath, as she had been wrung out like a lemon during the party preparations. At that moment, the maid arrived with a gift from the emperor, and it was a beautiful dress. The maids announced that at today's tea party, Sarara would be there not as a governess, but as a guest of His Majesty. But how is that possible, when the empire's highest-ranking aristocrats will be at the celebration? The maid began to comfort Sarara, as the twins and the emperor had prepared a surprise for her, and they would be delighted if she came to the celebration in that dress. In the end, the girl gave in to the maid's pleas and changed. Many noble figures gathered at the palace on this special day. There was a sea of people at the party, even though it was originally supposed to be a small tea ceremony. It was hard to get to Ferritin and Rosalind through the crowd. At that moment, Raphael approached the girl and thanked her for her active participation in organizing the event. At that moment, the girl noticed that among the guests were many of her students' parents, even the Duke who had been bothering her. Raphael noticed the girl's ambiguous reaction to Duke Besman, concluding that she found him extremely disagreeable. But she wasn't the only one. Many people didn't like the Duke, but he had mines for extracting magical stones at his disposal, so he was respected in high society. The girl felt uneasy, because she had managed to quarrel with this man in the past. But the reason was not that they disagreed on their views about education, but that the Duke was shamelessly pursuing her. Before Raphael had a chance to react to this, suddenly a loud child's scream echoed through the garden, demanding chocolate. But it was still too early for that, and the maids who were keeping things in order were struggling. Seeing this, Sarara decided to approach the children to ease the tension. They were delighted that the governess came to their celebration and even wore the gifts they had prepared for her. At that moment, other students joined the girls' group. They also wanted their share of hugs and affection. These children missed their favorite teacher very much and were happy to see her here. One of those students was Edward, who momentarily forgot his manners but quickly corrected himself. The girl was pleased to see that the boy still remembered what she had taught him. Seeing how the other children treated Sarara, the twins got angry and declared that the governess belonged only to them. Such behavior was very displeasing to the young lady, and she took a moment to remind everyone that their highnesses are behaving rather poorly towards their guests. And furthermore, you see, she only had 2 hands, so she'll only be able to hold the hands of those children, who are behaving in the very best possible way. So the children raced to their places, sitting quietly to hold the governess's hand and support her with their presence. Now they looked like very sweet little children. At that moment, the mothers of former students approached her, happy to see Sarara at this event. Letitia praised the girl for her work, as it was thanks to her that they were all gathered here. It was also interesting that there were many young ladies at the event who didn't even have children. They came here not for the twins, but solely to capture the emperor's attention and position themselves as potential future empresses. Moreover, it will soon be necessary to decide on a bride and conclude the marriage. Everyone believed that Sylvia Clocks had the best chance of becoming the new empress. It's all because this girl was the childhood friend of His Majesty, the king. But you see, if His Majesty happened to be secretly in love with someone, it certainly wasn't with the young Duchess. And at that moment, everyone heard and saw the fight between Princess Rosalind and Duke Besman's son. The girl not only hit him but also bit him hard. Even Sarah's hair stood on end from this spectacle. While everyone watched the princess beating the duke's son, Sarara was trying to figure out where Ferriton was. The boy sat on the grass, weeping bitterly over a gift box, approximately 66 characters. Seeing the governess approach, the boy rushed to her, seeking comfort and solace from his troubles. Meanwhile, the other maids tried to pull Rosalind away from the boy, but they were having no success at all. Only thanks to Sarara did she let go of her abuser. The governess couldn't understand what could have happened for her to behave like that. Sarara asked the girl to come over to her. At first she didn't want to do it, and then she threw herself into the governess's arms. Seeing the twins' reaction, the girl decided to take them aside and ask about what had just happened between them. After a while, the girl led the twins away to a quieter spot. The children were reluctant to share what had happened, but their demeanor made it clear that something unusual had occurred. Tears were just about to stream down their cheeks. Caramel saved them from hysterics. It turned out that Eliza was told that Helios would abandon the twins when he got married and had his own children. It's clear that a 7-year-old could come up with this, meaning he must have heard something like it from his father. It's no wonder that after such words, Rosalind hit Elise, and now she was crying, afraid that her older brother would really abandon them. Sarara began to calm the twins because something like this would never happen. Ferriton hoped his brother wouldn't hate them because they had no one else but him. Of course, Helios will always be with them and will never stop loving them. At that moment, the girl finally understood that the saying about the apple perfectly suited the Duke and his son. But it was time to return to the guests. However, their highnesses refused to go to the place where Eliza was. But Sarara had asked him to do this, because ignoring Eliza would be the greatest punishment he could possibly face. Besides, nothing else bad will happen while the Emperor is with them. Meanwhile, Sarara had time to tidy herself up, after which she could return to the celebration. Suddenly, a man's silhouette appeared behind the tree, clearly there for the girl. At the party, Helios went crazy from the boring and tiring talks with the ladies. All of Sylvia's words and questions went in one of his ears and out the other. Yet the girl showed persistent romantic interest in him. It was starting to weigh on him, hardly proper for a young lady to cling to an unmarried man in public. Approximately 117 characters. But the girl missed the hint, mistaking the Emperor's behavior for coy games. Approximately 80 characters. Meanwhile, Raphael ran up to him and told him about the situation with the twins. This came as a surprise to the Emperor. It was a good thing everyone was all right. On the other hand, it was a great chance to get rid of the young Duchess. Meanwhile, Sarara had problems in the form of Elise's drunken father. The man thought the girl was taking revenge with the twins, blamed and was rude to her. And then, he cast a magical spell on her. Meanwhile, Helios tried to calm the crowd of nobles who couldn't understand what had happened before their eyes or why. However, Sister Eliza had no intention of ignoring the situation and asked for her little brother's wounds to be tended to. At this moment, twins ran to their brother. Rosalind informed the Emperor that she admitted her guilt and regretted biting Elise and pulling out a lock of his hair. But Eliza started first, saying that Helios might not only abandon them, but also kill them once he had children of his own. Helios was silent, children cried near him, but still, he approached Lady Basman, saying that this time he would forgive their family because Rosalind had behaved improperly. But next time, their family won't be so lucky. Meanwhile, Duke Besman attacked Sararu, who was powerless against his magic, 99 characters. Clearly, he sought to take by force what she denied him before, 73 characters. She can come to see him in person once a week, especially since she doesn't want to teach his son. It was unacceptable, just like the fact that he was pulling her into the bushes, so the girl tried to step on his foot. Her outburst infuriated the man, prompting him to swing his hand to slap her across the face. Meanwhile, Helios asked Raphael to seek out the Duke of Besman for a conversation. The assistant hadn't even stepped away when the twins ran up to the Emperor, worried he was angry, and glad it wasn't at them. The young man was rather angry with himself for so rarely telling them, "I love you." At that moment, the kids knew their older brother loved them dearly, so they hugged each other tightly, out of pure joy. Suddenly, everyone realized that Sarara hadn't returned to the party yet. It was strange, but the worst part was that the drunk Duke Basman went into the garden where the girl was supposed to be. The Emperor quickly figured it out and rushed to the garden. He arrived in time and stopped the Duke from hitting the girl. The man was practically twisted by surprise. The Duke was no longer as bold as a moment ago. He trembled, but he still wanted to speak with the Emperor. However, Helios ignored his question. He wanted to know what had just happened here. The man shamelessly lied, accusing Sarara of stepping on his foot intentionally. Now it was clear to Helios from whom Elise had taken her example, and he had unforgivably insulted the imperial family. But this time he forgave them. But in the future, he never wants to hear anything like it from him again. The Duke really disliked hearing such things, but he had to endure it. This is despite him instilling all this nastiness in his son, who merely voiced it. The son tarnished his father's reputation by telling their highnesses everything. The man fell to his knees before the emperor, begging for forgiveness. But the man should have apologized to the twins and Sarara, whom he attacked, not to Helios. The Duke didn't want to do the latter, but the emperor's gaze froze the blood in his veins with terror. So he mumbled something awkwardly, and Helios decided that was enough for now. But from now on, Duke Basman had better not make such mistakes. Then the emperor took the girl to the palace. Sarara was perfectly fine. She thanked the emperor for saving her from danger. But Helios didn't believe her, as he could clearly see she was not all right. And Sarara cried, for she was very scared and disgusted by the situation in the garden. The emperor couldn't embrace and wipe away the girl's tears, but healing the wound on her hand was within his power and status. The pain soon passed, but only the girl's heart began to beat faster traitorously in her chest. Her tender feelings for the emperor arose so inappropriately. Worse still, these feelings might have been mutual. The man was far too solicitous with an ordinary governess. Such thoughts are too dangerous. They needed to be banished quickly, lest they bring misfortune. Yes, the emperor cannot be ignored, but it's best not to consider him as a romantic interest either. The treatment had come to an end, and at that moment, Sarara made a firm decision that, under no circumstances, would she ever reveal her true feelings for the man. But he was so close and so caring that it was hard to do this. Helios didn't understand what was happening to the girl. She seemed so troubled. How he wished he could hold her now and comfort her. But he couldn't, so the only thing he could do was drape his jacket over her shoulders. Approximately 89 characters. At that moment, the twins burst into the room, worried about Sarara's well-being. Seeing the girl's condition, they decided her older brother had hurt her, even though that wasn't the case. But if she's wearing Helios's clothes, then Sarara is sick. At that moment, the twins had a brilliant idea in their heads. They kissed the girl on both cheeks. They believed it was the best medicine for all ailments. At that moment, the girl noticed that Helios had turned away from them. The young man couldn't show how much the scene had embarrassed and touched him. Meanwhile, in high society, everyone was discussing how the Duke of Basman's son had insulted the imperial family at the tea party. The emperor's agenda included the matter of the Duke's mines. As the Duke had been unusually silent that day, the man believed he had no right to oppose the emperor, even if he wished to take back what he had once granted. After the meeting, Raphael noticed that Helios was not himself. The man regretted pushing too hard in his talk with the Duke today. But what's done is done, and right now, the emperor wanted to have lunch with the twins and, in general, spend more time with them. Besides, it was a great opportunity to check on Sarara's condition. The governess herself didn't know how she was supposed to react to the emperor dining with them again. The twins eagerly awaited their older brother's arrival. 5 minutes later, the emperor appeared in the dining hall. The man seemed to glow from within. He was so happy to see everyone around. Everything was fine right up until the moment Sarara refused to eat with everyone. The girl tried to convince the worried emperor that she had already eaten today. But in reality, she was so nervous that she was afraid she would throw up right at the table. The worst part was that she hadn't had a single crumb to eat all day. She was just too busy working. Helios realized that things weren't so simple, so he didn't mind if Sarara took a little break right now. However, Ferriton didn't understand his noble intention, believing that all dear ones should eat together, so the governess must stay. Arguments that the girl was very tired and needed to catch her breath had no effect on the boy at all. Because Ferriton really liked spending time with Sarara, and the food was always tastier next to her. So the girl stayed, even decided to cut the meat for the boy. At that moment, Rosalind asked Sarara if she would like to eat with them. But Sarara didn't respond, and Rosalind thought that perhaps Helios was displeased with her. Helios also sensed that a strange atmosphere had settled around the table. Rosalind continued to ponder, noting that even now Helios frowned, yet he remained the most handsome. Is Sarara really not paying attention to this at all, and the man doesn't interest her? And yet, the girl chose not to eat her carrots, which did not escape the governess's notice. So she promised that tomorrow, lunch would be entirely carrots. The emperor liked this approach very much, even though she always acted awkwardly around him. At that moment, completely different thoughts about the girl entered his head, which he tried to push away. Meanwhile, Rosalind finally started eating her carrots, as she didn't want to have a lunch entirely of carrots tomorrow. At that moment, Sarara was proud of the girl for eating everything. After eating, the kids went swimming with the maids, and the emperor had a word with the governess, but the girl didn't understand why they needed to sit so close together for that. If that was awkward, then she was mistaken. It became awkward when she had to lie to the emperor's face, saying she had already eaten, but Helios didn't believe her, and instead, he suggested that she join him for a meal, as he himself had not eaten yet either. She should have refused him, but lacked the strength. But everything needed to be clarified, and Sarara said that he was the emperor, she was the governess, and they couldn't sit at the same table due to their different social statuses. And if someone sees something like this, it will cast a shadow on the emperor's reputation. Except that this was all unexpected for him, because in his opinion, she was perfect in everything, and she had nothing to worry about. However, for now, I decided not to push her and take a step back. At that moment, the happy and clean twins burst into the room. If Rosalind ran to Helios, then Ferritin climbed into Sarara's arms and wanted to play games with her, but it was too late and time to go to bed. Sarara decided that the boys' whims worked to her advantage, allowing her to postpone the conversation with the emperor. The children were also happy, because while Sarara played with Ferritin, Helios would read to Rosalind. But the emperor wasn't inspired by this. He didn't want to spend this night sleepless. Rosalind didn't understand what was wrong with her brother. She thought he and Sarara would read a book aloud together to get closer. But the adults looked at the girl and wondered what had made her so happy. Moreover, the girl wanted to choose a book that had a moment with a kiss. Adults noticed that kids take longer than usual to pick a book. They usually grab the first thing they see, but here they're being so careful. As a result, the choice fell on the Sleeping Beauty. The choice surprised Sararu a bit, as the twins didn't like fairy tales about princesses. The surprises didn't end there. Rosalind wanted the governess to read the princess's lines, while Helios would read the wizard's. No one dared to argue with the twins, so the reading began. The children were delighted because the kissing scene was about to begin any minute, when suddenly Rosalind asked an innocent question, "And when will brother and Sarara kiss?" Astonishment froze on the faces of the adults. No one expected this from the girl. Rosalind didn't understand why they weren't kissing. Had they really fought that badly? The girl tried so hard. She found the story, hoping it would help them make up. In the end, Helios read his line, but Sarara decided to skip hers, for which she earned an involuntary exclamation from the princess. One cannot miss the most important part, and refuses to take part in this key moment of the story. It's time to remember that a kiss in this tale is the most crucial event. Without it, everything is lost. Sarara tried to explain to the children that only the closest people do this. This was the issue. It's clear now that the adults had a poor relationship. Rosalind even cried, because her worst suspicions had been confirmed. In less than a minute, the twins were crying loudly. Because the people closest to them hate each other, that's why they don't kiss. That's why there's so much awkwardness between them. And they didn't expect Helios to quarrel with Sarara behind their backs. And to fix everything, Rosalind searched hard for this tale for them, but they ruined it all. The situation was tough, and clearly, to calm the kids, everything needed to be redone. And a moment later, the emperor gently kissed the girl's hand. This was what the children had longed for, so they couldn't hide their delight. Now they could finish the fairy tale and finally feel free. Nevertheless, Sarara continued to think about the kiss. For her, it was the first time, but the emperor had accompanied many ladies at balls, so for him, it was normal. The governess finished reading, and it was time for the twins to go to bed. Reluctantly, they lay down, but hadn't fallen asleep yet, and asked Sarara and Helios never to quarrel. It was nice, though a bit tiring. After that, Sarara got ready to go home, and luckily, the carriage was already waiting for her. But the emperor didn't catch the obvious hint and wanted to see her off. It was exciting, the night. They walk under the moon like a couple, and Jean guards their peace. Nevertheless, the girl promised to have a talk with the twins, so they wouldn't add to the emperor's troubles with their whims. But this wasn't their fault. It was Helios's initiative, as he wanted to spend a little more time with the girl. And for such words, every lady of the empire would forgive him even the most terrible crime. It's funny, but Helios was more serious than ever, and it was clear he wasn't acting out of politeness or pity. It scared him more than a chupacabra. But it was all turned into a joke, and the emperor thought he'd invented too strange an excuse to go for a walk with the girl. So the man apologized to the girl for having embarrassed her earlier. Sarara pretended that everything was fine and went home, but all would be well if Jean hadn't noticed something strange happening with Helios lately. There was no response, and the emperor could not admit that he was jealous. A new day has arrived, bringing new problems. The advisors were pressing the emperor, demanding that he marry and secure an heir. If he's not ready for married life, then at least let him have a mistress. The emperor didn't want to deal with this issue, so he chose to postpone it for now. However, other matters needed urgent attention, and honestly, the man was already tired. But he realized he'd have to find a wife too, with a sea of candidate profiles to review, all of which needed careful consideration. Among them, he even found the profile of Duchess Clocks. On one hand, it was the perfect choice, but on the other, Helios fell into despair, picturing her next to him. Raphael understood the emperor, but he couldn't run from marriage forever, and sooner or later, he'd have to make a difficult choice. Helios understood this himself, as it is also one of the ruler's responsibilities. If that's the case, the emperor should pay attention to Lady Clocks. She is beautiful, smart, and powerful. And the best part is that you can use the wizards who serve her to strengthen the positions of the imperial family. For a long time, the Duchy of Clocks has monopolized many branches of magic, and even the court mages were trained by them. Their power in matters of magic is so great that they don't even rush to report to the emperor about their work. But even in his mind, Helios couldn't picture himself married to Sylvia. However, the time to meet the Duchess has arrived. The girl arrived on time, beaming with happiness. She was pleased the emperor agreed to walk with her in the garden. But she couldn't help but notice that Helios was tense today, and she suspected it was because of her proposal. It was partly true, as he believed that one should not rush into making a decision about marriage. This is true, but Sylvia was ready to act in the emperor's interests, and their duchy's magic would strengthen his position in the empire. Yes, that sounded good, and arranged marriages were the norm in their world, but he needed to think ahead about the twins and how his decision would affect them. On that note, Helios bid farewell to the young duchess. The girl didn't detain him but hoped their next meeting would bring a positive answer. Approximately 104 characters. The duchess dreamed she would soon live in a palace. Suddenly, she saw the emperor rush to his young ones and their governess after meeting with her. Together, they looked like a real, close-knit family. Sarara admitted the children asked them to accompany them to the meeting with His Majesty. At that moment, Sylvia realized that reaching her goal would not be so easy after all. Meanwhile, the emperor continued his walk with the governess and the children. Everything was fine until the kids started getting fussy because of the heat, so Helios decided to carry Ferritin. The boy kept squirming, refusing to be held. He too wanted to hold Sararu's hand as they walked. Evening fell unnoticed. The governess prepared to leave on time today, with no overtime work. It's all because the kids fell asleep quickly today since they were very tired from playing in the garden. That's good, but the girl was worried about the emperor's condition. He looked unusually weary today. 110 characters. He didn't comment on it at all, but the girl didn't need his words, as she could clearly see that he was carrying a heavy burden in his heart. Perhaps it's about the meeting with the Duchess of Clocks, but she shouldn't dwell on it. Suddenly, Helios suggested to the girl that they take a little walk, and this time she agreed. The walk was absolutely wonderful, but it seems that the emperor will have to pay for the overtime hours at a double rate. But all of this was just a joke on the girl's part. She didn't really need the reward for the walk. Nevertheless, the young man could afford to raise his salary by an additional 600 gold coins. And only after some time they turned it all into a joke. That made the young people laugh. At that moment, Helios realized that he had invited the girl for a walk just because he wanted to see her smile. Seeing the young man's condition, Sarara decided to sweeten his life a little, and so she gave him a few caramels. After all, sweets usually lift one's spirits, and that's exactly what the emperor needs right now. Now he knew how she comforts his younger brother and sister when they are being fussy. So the young man ate all the candies, even the ones that had melted a little. Sarara was almost in tears because she thought she had given the emperor some good candies, and these had melted, so she wanted to take them back. But Helios wasn't going to give away all the candy, though he might share one. He wasn't going to hand her the sweet directly. The girl might get her hands dirty, so she would have to eat from the emperor's hand. Sarara hesitated, but then she gathered her courage and ate the candy. In this way, they enjoyed their sweets together, and the girl couldn't help but think about how much Helios resembled his younger siblings, who absolutely adore caramel candies. Meanwhile, the man ate 3 pieces, after which he smiled. He feels very calm with his governess. In the evening, he had a lot of problems to deal with, managing the empire, the situation with his marriage, and the candidates for that role. Only near Sarara did he forget all his troubles and worries. She alone brought peace to his heart and soul. Only this girl, with genuine warmth in her heart, truly cared for him, for Rosalind and Ferritin. Nevertheless, the time for the walk was coming to an end, and the young man thanked the girl for the honor she had bestowed upon him. He even felt a little tempted to tease her one last time, so he tried to run away from her, not expecting her to be in such poor physical shape. The young woman was utterly exhausted from even the slightest physical exertion. Her hair had stuck together, and the young man felt a sudden urge to tidy it up a little for her. At that moment, Raphael rushed over to them, looking very much troubled by something. Someone paid for and published an article with dirt on the emperor. It mixed truth and complete nonsense about Helios and his non-relationship with the governess of their highnesses. The emperor wanted to understand what exactly the meaning of this article was. The point is, he's taken a mistress at the palace, and this mistress is the governess to his younger brother and sister. Therefore, it's best for Sarare to head home quickly now. The emperor will later tell her how to proceed after this article. The man hoped the article would be forgotten quickly, but the girl should avoid public appearances for the next few days. After that, the girl went back home. A new day has begun. The twins did great with their work today. This was the homework the children received from their governess to complete. Besides drawing, they also needed to read a book as well. But this time the emperor wasn't fooled. He looked at the drawings of the twins and decided that they needed to try to complete the task one more time. As time went on, Helios found himself growing increasingly weary of the twins. The young man couldn't understand how Sarara could handle them every day and endure their whims without losing patience. At that moment, Raphael burst into the training room. The very article he spoke of to the emperor yesterday is out. Before Helios could read the article, Ferritin snatched the messenger's curious note from his hands in an instant. The boy tried to read it, but he didn't get the chance as the emperor took the magazine. The young man didn't read that in front of kids, so he gave the article back to Raphael. But before we started discussing business, we had to put the children to bed, who absolutely did not want to go to sleep. However, Helios reminded the younger ones that if they didn't complete their homework and didn't go to bed on time, then Sarara would find out about it, and she would be quite upset. So, with great difficulty, he sent the twins off with the maids to wash up and go to bed. Raphael mentioned that the article stated the emperor has a mistress who has access to the palace and with whom he spends passionate nights. There is a brief mention of the governess for now, but it's only a matter of time before everyone finds out about her identity, which means she could soon run into trouble. At that moment, the twins returned, so the emperor planned to discuss the remaining questions after he put them to bed. During this time, he intended to consider the situation and decide how to protect Sarara from baseless accusations. Meanwhile, the girl was taken aback. In the evening, for the first time, there was such a huge crowd of people under her windows. The letter from the emperor, stating that they wanted to reveal her identity, but that he would handle the reporters who would be waiting for her, somewhat reassured her. Still, she hadn't expected the situation to spiral out of control and for the magazine article to cause so much harm. On the other hand, she had to understand that if a person of low birth was given the position of tutor to the imperial children, there would be a sea of rumors. A new day has arrived. Disguised, Sarara stepped out of the house. And in just a moment, John, who had come to fetch her, pulled her into the carriage. He didn't behave very appropriately, but a girl shouldn't stand outside for too long if she doesn't want to be noticed by journalists. The girl wanted to know what was in the article that caused such a strong uproar. Jean said that the article discusses how the emperor has developed a romantic interest, with whom he spends every night in the castle. Yes, Sarara would howl at night with the emperor in the garden, but it wasn't even a date. As it turned out, the man held the same opinion. This realization sharply cut through the girl's mind. Jean was sure everything would settle down soon, but Helios would appear less often at the twins' place so as not to fuel various rumors. The work week has begun, and while the twins were drinking tea, the girl thought about how she would get home. At that moment, one of the maids, who had also been reading an article about the emperor, burst into the room. She was convinced the article was about the governess, and for some reason, the governess confirmed this news. And a large number of people were eavesdropping on this little dialogue from under the door, ready to start gossiping. Sarara partly used this, saying the emperor simply escorted her to the carriage at night, and they walked through the garden. It happened because the lessons ended late, and the emperor and the knight accompanied her, which led to a scandal. Only the maid had her doubts, you see, because the article went into such excessive detail, even describing how the emperor and the governess held hands, of all things. But this was already interesting, so Sarara asked the maid to let her read this magazine. In just a few minutes, the girl was reading an article about herself and the emperor. It's good there wasn't a detailed description of the girl provided. However, there was a comment from Duchess Clocks, claiming the emperor dislikes sweets. It was said that this girl was the perfect choice for the role of the future empress of the empire. Meanwhile, the time had come to check the twins' homework, and Sarah realized that someone had been actively assisting them in completing their assignments. Now they are getting ready to work on spelling and were even prepared to write 4 sentences. And then the children asked the girl what the secret boar meant. The children didn't quite understand the meaning of this expression, just like Sarara, where they heard about it. Suddenly the twins froze, thought for a moment, and remembered they should say not secrets of the boar, but secrets of Roman. Though the girl didn't want to answer, she had to. Now the children knew that a secret affair was when 2 people met secretly from others. The twins admitted that they had read it from the note that Raphael had brought over, and afterward, they received comments in their homework journals about it. Rosalind began to ponder the possibility that Helios might have a girlfriend, someone he hasn't mentioned to any of us. But it's easy to see this girl is clearly not Sarara. Nevertheless, the girl asked the governess what she thought of their older brother. The question sounded quite strange, but Sarara replied that she considered the emperor a magnificent person. Such an answer did not satisfy Rosalind. She wanted to know if Governess Helios liked it or not. The princess couldn't believe her governess didn't like the emperor at all, that she didn't want to hold his hand and kiss him under the moon. The governess wasn't going to respond to such strange questions. Meanwhile, Raphael and Helios were discussing that Sylvia Clocks should be the emperor's partner at the next ball. Right now, this is the only right decision, but Helios really didn't want to go through with it. The assistant understood his feelings, but due to the scandal, Sarara is already facing issues, and the emperor's appearance at the ball with Sylvia will help resolve them. The only problem is that Helios never appeared at balls with women, and if he comes with Lady Clocks, he won't be able to escape marriage. Accordingly, everyone will think Sylvia is his fiancée, and Sarara will think so too. Noticing the emperor's wavering, Raphael reminded His Majesty that he needed to come to his senses and stop building castles in the air. Helios was curious whether Raphael was speaking as his assistant or as his friend. The man was at work at the time, performing his duties, so he said things that might not have pleased the emperor. Since that's the case, Helios would now like to hear a friend's opinion on this, not a servant's. As a friend, Raphael wanted the emperor to marry for love. This answer from the emperor was satisfactory, so he asked his assistant to send a message not to Duchess Clocks. He needed to speak with Sarara. He told the girl there'd be a palace ball, and their highnesses would have to dance. A ball will be held to celebrate the arrival of Prince von Isabel at the palace. The twins were thrilled by the news and the chance to see Isabel in person. The One Empire was small, but at the same time it remained an ally of the Adalio Empire, because the former empress was the sister of the ruler of those lands. Meanwhile, Helios asked the twins if they would like to practice and perform a beautiful dance at the ball. Sarara will help them with this, of course. Meanwhile, His Highness Isabel rode slowly to the palace, suffering from the heat. The young man reflected on the fact that it had been about a year and a half since his cousin became emperor. 6 months prior, the funerals of the previous emperor and empress had taken place. It was probably at the funeral that he saw his cousin for the last time. Reading the scandalous article, the young man understood his brother wasn't doing as badly as he first thought. And now he's in the palace. At first, they greeted each other according to protocol, but in the next moment, the brothers embraced. After that, Helios kindly suggested to Isabella that she join Rosalind and Ferriton for lunch. The twins eagerly awaited their cousin's arrival, which left them in a state of excited anticipation and energy. The girl and boy spotted their older brother and decided to greet him properly, as befits young aristocrats of royal blood. This was followed by warm embraces. Lunch arrived with a touch of melancholy, Isabel saddened by the empty seats at the table. Lunch was in full swing, and the children were chattering non-stop about their governess, who could do absolutely everything. Isabel didn't understand who they were talking about, so her cousin said it was the governess. The twins were indignant, because for them, the girl was much more than that. The imagination painted a picture of a 40-year-old woman, so he was curious to see this remarkable governess in person. But that wasn't the end of it for the children. They went on to share that Serar and Helios had once shared a kiss, which nearly caused the man to choke on his tea, for it was not true, as that day they were simply acting out a scene from a children's fairy tale, nothing more. Isabel looked very slyly at her royal brother with a cunning gaze. The next day, Sarara practiced the dance with Roslyn and Ferritin when a maid rushed into the room unexpectedly. The girls informed the governess that a prince had arrived to observe how the twins' lessons were progressing. They were thrilled by this, as they admired the beauty of the young man before them. Rumors spread that one must be extremely cautious around this young man at all times, because he's quite the ladies' man, surrounded by crowds of women who are even ready to fight over him. It turns out Isabel personally asked to join the main character's classes. Helios gladly agreed, as the girl's approach was quite intriguing and rather unusual for him. But there was one thing I was curious about. Morok wanted to understand how the emperor fell for the governess. Meanwhile, during class, Rosalind froze like a statue once again during the dance, and Ferritin wasn't looking much better. So the first thing to do was to release this tension and only then proceed with the lesson. Now they were starting to get it a little better, though not perfectly. After a few minutes, the tension completely faded, and the children began to enjoy dancing together. It was at that moment that Isabel entered the ballroom. The twins hugged their cousin, and Sarara introduced herself to him with all the proper etiquette. The girl was truly beautiful, and her dance lessons were quite impressive too. Isabel hoped to see her at the ball, but she won't be there tonight. Meanwhile, the twins were having problems again. Rosalind stepped on her brother's foot once more. The twins found it quite hard to remember the dance, so Isabel decided to help them by demonstrating herself. Since they didn't have a pianist, he planned to use magic while dancing with the governess instead. Honestly, this wasn't part of the main character's plans, but she couldn't bring herself to refuse. With a snap of fingers, the piano played by itself. To the sound of a lovely melody, the couple began to waltz. Sarara felt mixed emotions, as she had never danced with a man before this moment. Isabel danced excellently, but during the dance, he wanted to talk. He was curious about Sarara's relationship with Helios. She, however, maintained the version that they were just employer and employee. Meanwhile, she explained to the children what to do in the dance and when to do it. At that moment, Isabel whispered in her ear that he knew she was the emperor's secret lover. For what did you receive that painful kick? No trace remains of the prince's former kindness. Out of spite, he could file an official complaint to the emperor as he was hurt. At that moment, the twins began to defend their governess. They hugged the girl and were sure their cousin didn't even feel it. The twins got so carried away that Sarara had to calm them down because they weren't supposed to protect her. And it's not necessary to forgive right after an apology, because a person forgives another only when their heart is ready to do so. At that moment, Isabel laughed, admitting that he would love to sit in on every class if they were all so unusual. And his leg wasn't hurting at all. He was simply teasing the children who were so wholeheartedly defending their teacher. Plus, he learned all he wanted, and it's time for him to go. Meanwhile, Helios was busy with important matters and was very tired. He was worried that Isabel went to his younger kids' class. He wanted to go there, but at the same time, for Sarara's sake, he had to stay away from her. At that moment, Isabel returned, saying that the twins had been trying their best, and their governess was a very sweet person. But that's not all. Isabella's relatives asked her to come and check on Helios's condition. Helios was relatively normal, but the accident occurred due to the train driver's fault. 110 characters. A man claimed a long-haired, red-eyed girl was standing on the tracks. 82 characters. But no one has seen her since then. The royal mages found no trace of a curse or anything like that at all. It was sad, but Isabel could do nothing to help her cousin. However, she could ask for permission to participate in the dance lessons. His help will be useful since he is a great dancer. Plus, he'll spend time with the twins, and if he gets the chance, he'll make a move on their charming governess. But Helios, completely disregarding this outburst, gave his consent. It was interesting. Isabel was convinced that her cousin was interested in the governess, and she was in love with him. But this couple hides their feelings from each other. The days passed, and the twins' dance training continued. Isabel was quite the harsh tyrant indeed. Overall, it didn't bother her. Sarara was even surprised at how well the prince managed to teach the children. But the kids got tired faster from his drive, and they appeared to be far too sorrowful. It wasn't about the dancing, but what happened this morning. This morning, Helios shared something important with them. The children didn't understand why brother would dance with Sylvia. Moreover, the twins recently overheard a conversation between the maids, who were convinced that the Duchess of Clocks would become Empress. Does Helios really love her and secretly meet with her, but the man hasn't been seeing anyone? But the children didn't believe him. thinking only those in love go to balls. As a result, the children were in a bad mood today. Moreover, Helios always attended balls with the twins and never danced with anyone. Sarara understood that the article had put the emperor in a difficult position, and such a move was not the worst way out for him. But children must understand the main thing. How would they feel if they liked someone, and Helios was against that person? They realized they would have been very sad at that moment. The same happens with the emperor. He feels sad, so the twins must support his decision during this time. Besides, Sarara is doing well and is eagerly waiting for the moment she sees His Majesty's first dance. Isabel watched the scene from the side and stayed silent. In his view, the situation was quite strange indeed. To help the lovers, he invited Sarara to the grand ball tonight. After all, this ball is in his honor, so he must come with a partner. But he was refused, not understanding why the girl wasn't going to the ball and why her family remained silent about it. At that moment, the girl realized that the man mistook her for an aristocrat. She wanted to clarify everything, but no one would listen. Isabel was determined to go with her, period. The twins actually liked this idea as well, but she didn't give up, so Isabel brought out all her charm, and now they could dance a little more. At that moment, the girl realized she was in trouble. The day of the ball arrived, and the twins made no mistakes in their dance practice. Everything was fine, but the girl didn't want to go to the ball that evening. But the kids disagreed. Faratan was sure he would make mistakes in the dance without her. The girl couldn't let the children down, so she promised to be at the ball. After Sarara's class, she had another important engagement. She still couldn't believe she was going to the ball with the prince. The young man has been waiting for her. He was already ready for the triumph, and beaming with joy that the girl had indeed come. Besides, the prince thought the girl wanted to know who Helios was dating. Though she denied her feelings, it was clear she cared about the situation. It was her mistake, because the man hadn't said anything about feelings, and she'd taken the bait, revealing everything herself. Feelings aside, it was time to try on the dress. But Sarara was in no hurry to put it on. She wasn't sure she had the right to do so. No matter what, Isabel wanted the girl to shine at the ball, and that means she will definitely shine. Evening fell, and they arrived at the ball. Next, the young lady must allow the prince to follow etiquette and herself act as his partner for the evening. And so they entered the throne room, where Helios sat upon his throne. The emperor did not expect his cousin to be accompanied by Sarara. If the girl was a bit nervous, her companion was thoroughly enjoying the unfolding events. People around were whispering, but Isabel told the girl to ignore them, as she looked absolutely stunning today. The couple approached the emperor, and welcoming speeches began. Whispers intensified as everyone remembered her father's story, and Sarara finally grasped the difference between herself and Helios. But the mothers of her former students didn't recognize her in that beautiful dress and accompanied by Isabel. They even thought that the role of the secret lover could belong to her. Meanwhile, at the next table, Sylvia was shaking with rage. At that very moment, a young man approached her and expressed his concerns about the possibility that she might fall ill in the same way she did a few years ago. The girl didn't comment on this, although an unpleasant feeling remained. She had no desire to continue the conversation. Besides, it was time to return to the emperor. Moreover, the time for the first dance has come. Meanwhile, Isabel stood aside, reflecting that all this time he had considered Sarara to be someone she wasn't. He thought the girl belonged to an important aristocratic family, but that wasn't the case. Even though there were actually more than enough clues, he just wasn't paying any attention to them at all. So he decided to ask the girl directly how she became a governess in the imperial family. She has a talent for teaching children, and she does it exceptionally well, better than most. However, if we talk about the current situation, she is very much aware of her position, which is why there's really no need to try to set her up with the emperor. It was now clear that all his efforts had been in vain. There must be someone else beside the emperor. Sarara even found the strength to admire the intricate dance moves performed by the Duchess, marveling at her grace. However, Isabel paid no attention to her cheerful chatter, unsure if she knew about her cousin's feelings for her. The time for the twins' dance was near. So, to get a good view of everything, they planned to take the very best seats available. On the opposite side stood Helios with Sylvia. He was watching not his younger siblings but his cousin and the governess. The music started playing and the children began to dance, doing everything perfectly. This was the result that every teacher hopes to see after long and hard work with their students. Overall, the twins performed excellently, and at that moment, Isabel decided to give Sarara a gift. His gift was that he gently pushed the girl right into the arms of the emperor, and only thanks to the young man's reaction, she didn't fall to the floor. The girl bowed deeply before His Majesty, apologizing for her clumsiness and awkwardness. But the young man didn't need an apology. He just wanted to dance with the girl. Without waiting for her consent, Helios swept her into the dance. Helios was worried that the girl had come to the ball with his cousin, but he was also glad she was here. They then exchanged a few standard compliments and generally had a polite conversation. But the parents were far from polite. After such turns and bends, Sarar almost lost consciousness from embarrassment. But she found the strength and told us that Isabel was a great help to her while she was training twins, and that she herself learned a lot from him during their joint sessions. At that moment, the Emperor's face changed drastically. The song also ended, just like the magic of the dance. At that very moment, Sylvia approached them, and she was in a rather combative mood, feeling somewhat neglected and overlooked by the attention of His Majesty. She was almost hanging on Helios, as she had been waiting for this day eagerly, and now he is sharing his attention with someone else. After that, she turned to Sarara and sincerely apologized for taking His Majesty away, acknowledging that, after all, it was she who was supposed to be his partner for the evening. The Duchess's hint was more than transparent, so Sarara apologized and stepped away from the couple. Meanwhile, the Emperor was quite displeased with the behavior of his companion, as he had specifically requested her to be his partner only for the very first dance. The governess found a small sofa to sit on because she was very tired and wanted to take off her shoes. Now it was possible to relax a bit and pour some wine. At that moment, Victor approached her, complimenting her dancing skills. Moreover, he himself wouldn't mind inviting the girl to dance. Meanwhile, the twins were dying of boredom in their rightful places. Truthfully, they wanted neither to eat nor drink. 54 characters. Rosalind wondered about the relationship between Duchess Locks and their elder brother. 90 characters. The girl suspected that this woman could be their brother's secret lover, and if he really liked her, then she would have to understand her and accept her into the family. Meanwhile, Ferriton noticed that Sarara was surrounded by a group of men who were eagerly trying to invite her to dance. So the boy came up with the idea to save the governess from her unwanted suitors. But the ball was crowded, making it quite difficult to locate the governess. Not only were they unable to find Sarara, but at one point, Ferriton also lost his sister. The boy couldn't understand where his sister had gone, as he had just been holding her hand and now she was gone. At that moment, Isabel approached the frightened prince holding Rosalind in her arms. The children were very scared, as they had never been lost in such a large crowd before, so they were relieved when a familiar person found them. The twins admitted they ran away from Raphael to search for Sarara, but they don't know where to find her. So the cousin decided to help the twins find a girlfriend. But first they found Helios and Lady Clocks. This aroused some suspicion in the Emperor, as the girl's partner and the twins were here, but she was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, Sylvia decided to greet Isabel, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. But when the twins started acting up and Helios tried to reason with them, Sylvia's glare was so sharp it froze their blood, approximately 134 characters. Especially the way Rosalind looked at her, burning with intensity, made it clear she was completely against this girl. The Emperor pretended nothing happened, but he asked why the twins seemed so tense and uneasy. It was simple, they looked for Sarara and couldn't find her. Helios was displeased that Isabel brought a girl to her first ball, then left her to the mercy of unmarried men, 131 characters. Seeing her brother's reaction, Rosalind decided to stir the pot, saying Sarara looked too beautiful today, so every man wanted to dance with her, 164 characters. Given this situation, it's quite possible the governess fell in love with someone. It was an outright provocation, so Isabel doubted that her cousin would believe such nonsense, but apparently she overestimated him. Such blatant manipulation worked, and Helios decided to go find the girl, leaving the twins with their cousin, approximately 121 characters. And if Isabel took this rather well, then the Duchess, for the umpteenth time that evening, was shaking with rage. Not wanting anything to do with her, he scooped up the twins in his arms. It was time to eat ice cream, and although Ferriton didn't want to, Rosalind covered his mouth, and they walked away. Meanwhile, Helios lost his mind, unable to find a governess, approximately 68 characters. Lucky him, he spotted the hem of her lovely blue dress on the balcony, approximately 76 characters. His joy knew no bounds. It was cool on the balcony, and for the first time that evening, the girl felt comfortable, but she hadn't expected the disheveled Emperor to appear there. The girl didn't understand what the man was doing there, so she worried that the twins might have gotten into trouble. It wasn't like that. The Emperor came for another reason. But telling the truth was much harder than lying. Nevertheless, the admission that he was worried about the girl slipped from his lips. I wonder in what way His Majesty was concerned about her well-being. It was all because today, the young woman was incredibly popular, and men were lining up, eager to have a conversation and dance with her. This surprised the girl a little, Nonetheless, she appreciated such attention from him, as he cared for her like a parent cares for their own child. The emperor said nothing in response, but hinted to the girl that there were many people around who shouldn't be trusted. Sarara wasn't 16 years old, she could stand up for herself perfectly well. At that moment, all the palace guests stepped onto the balconies. It's because fireworks were supposed to launch now. They were currently in the absolute best spot to enjoy the fireworks display. The girl watched the scene as if enchanted by it. At that moment, it struck her that this was the best day of her life, because she had danced with the emperor, and now she was watching fireworks with him. The moment was magical, and it's no surprise that she confessed her love to the emperor. It's just that the fireworks drowned out her words. The young man either didn't hear them or pretended he didn't. And that was probably for the best, since her confession didn't really change anything at that point. The girl perfectly understood that her contract would expire in a month, and most likely she would never see the emperor again, so she needed to stop dreaming about him. At that moment, a weary Rosalind and Ferriton appeared on the balcony. Prince Isabel brought them here because the kids were almost asleep, and he didn't know what to do with them. Sarara was ready to take the children to bed, as the emperor still needed to see off the guests. When the girl with the children left, Raphael asked His Majesty a reasonable question. Was he on the balcony alone with the governess? He received an affirmative answer. However, this presented a problem, as they had been in a well-known rendezvous spot within the palace, a place still surrounded by numerous legends. For example, true love begins right here in this very spot. For example, the emperor's parents met right here while watching fireworks, and that's how their love story began. Meanwhile, Sarara put the children to bed, and they dreamed of seeing their older brother dance with the governess again. It was very sweet, and she happily sat with the children until they fell asleep peacefully, but problems arose when it was time for her to go home. And specifically, she didn't have a carriage to go home. The only thing the knights could offer was a horse, but Sarar didn't know how to ride it at all. And she'll have to wait 3 hours for the next carriage, but returning to the palace would have been unseemly, so she decided to sit on a bench by the fountain. But she didn't reach the bench, as she caught a scandal between 2 noblewomen fighting over a prince. Isabel stood there covered in lipstick as if it was nothing. A fight broke out, even the prince got hit, then Sarara stepped on a branch. But she was lucky, she managed to hide in the bushes, so the fighting girls didn't notice her. But in just a few minutes, Prince Isabel found her in the secret hideout. He helped her up, not expecting to see a girl in such a strange place as the bushes by the fountain. So he asked her to leave as quickly as possible, so people wouldn't think badly of them together. Meanwhile, Helios was planning to go take a break, when suddenly he and his assistants noticed Sarara together with the prince, near the fountain. They chatted sweetly about something, even though the prince looked quite intriguing. Helios realized there had been a mix-up with the carriage, so he quickly walked towards his brother and the governess. The man approached the couple and first examined his cousin from head to toe, then asked him if he understood what he was doing right now. It felt like the brothers were ready to kill each other with their eyes. The situation was spiraling out of control, so Sarara stepped in, unaware of what she'd done to provoke such a reaction. But Isabel couldn't resist teasing her brother a little longer. She pulled the girl close and whispered curious questions in her ear. With every minute of this scene, Helios was going more and more mad with jealousy. So the girl shouted that she had fallen, that's why she was dirty. And besides, she hadn't put on lipstick, and she hadn't done anything wrong for the emperor to behave like that. That alone wasn't enough, so Helios asked the governess to step toward him and away from Isabel, approximately 116 characters. All was well, but she stumbled and began to fall, luckily, into his arms, approximately 77 characters. The only thing is that neither man intended to let her go. The emperor was even ready to escort her home. Isabel let the girl go, but, he wasn't liking the situation even more, because Helios felt stronger feelings for the governess than he had initially supposed. Meanwhile, the emperor led the girl into his office. While he searched for her change of clothes, she slept. Seizing the moment, the emperor healed her wounds on her legs, hoping that she wouldn't wake up and would get some good rest. Meanwhile, the twins were sleeping soundly, dreaming of their governess. At some point, Ferriton started feeling unwell and woke up his sister. The girl realized her brother had a stomachache. Meanwhile, the girl woke up in His Majesty's study, remembering how she had come here herself and fallen asleep on the couch. It was strange, but Helios was also in the office on the opposite sofa, and he was sleeping too. Nevertheless, it was already morning, and it was time to get to work. At that moment, Sarana once again realized just how beautiful the Emperor was. Helios woke up, admitting that he had wanted to wake the girl up a little later, but he himself dozed off and couldn't do it. It turned out that Helios broke all his sleep records today, sleeping for a full 6 hours straight. The man apologized, saying that although he noticed her limping at the ball, he didn't pay it much mind, and was able to heal her legs afterward. The young man also prepared a change of clothes for her, which was lying on the table. She needed to change into something clean, as it was probably already uncomfortable to walk around in that ball gown. Meanwhile, knights arrived at the Emperor's office, holding twins in their arms. Only the maids who served at the palace were not allowed to enter the study. One of them told the head housekeeper that the Emperor had been in the study with the governess since last night and wouldn't open the door, no matter how much they knocked. But even in such a situation, the head housekeeper demanded that the study be opened immediately. Rosalind got off the knight's hands, knocked on the door, shouted, and asked her brother to open. Meanwhile, Sarara finished changing clothes. Only now did the couple hear someone banging on the door, and that someone was Rosalind. Within minutes, Helios was in the hallway, holding Ferritin in his arms. Ferritin was struggling, not letting his older brother examine him, and a second later, the boy broke free and ran to the toilet. After the boy had taken care of his important business, his stomach stopped hurting. We've dealt with that. Now the boy was bothered by the question of why Sarara was in his older brother's room so early. This question troubled not only the little prince, but also everyone who became an unwilling witness to this event. At that moment, the girl felt the strange gazes of those around her on her. Only now did the young people realize how they and the situation looked from outside. The young man tried to explain to everyone that nothing had happened between him and Sarara that night. But who would believe him? The maids decided to pretend that they saw nothing, knew nothing, and wouldn't tell anyone anything. However, the Emperor repeated 100 times that there was nothing between him and the governess. He just helped her in a tough situation. After that, they went to breakfast. Everyone was curious about what had happened to Ferritin, why his stomach hurt. Everything had been fine the night before. It's all because Ferritin was eating ice cream with his cousin last night. Turns out, while Helios was looking for Sararu, Isabel decided they all should have some ice cream. But if it were just about one ice cream, nothing would have happened. It's obvious the boy ate 2 whole ones and didn't want to admit it. He ate not 2, but a whole 3 ice creams. A few days passed after the ball, but the rumors about Prince Israel wouldn't die down. Meanwhile, Prince Ferritin was angry, no one believed him, and he was telling the truth. Rosalind was determined to talk, and she hoped Sarara would spend every night with Helios, despite the rumors swirling around. The governess tried to reason with the children, warning them not to speak such things, as gossip about her and His Majesty was unwanted. But the children didn't understand. They thought it would be wonderful if their older brother and the governess loved each other. But that was impossible, and the children had to accept that their brother loved another woman, whom he brought to the ball. The only problem was that the twins didn't like her at all. The girl no longer wanted to listen to all this, so she made the twins do their tasks. She thought to herself that there were only 12 lessons left with their highnesses until the end of the contract, and after that, her life would return to its usual routine. In the time she had left, she intended to let go of her feelings for the Emperor and create many memories with the twins. Evening fell, and the governess arrived with a report for His Majesty. But the report began with Helios explaining that every summer they travel to the remote parts of the Empire, showing that he cares about the well-being of all citizens. On one hand, it was a business trip, but on the other hand, it was a family journey, so he was deciding where to go this year. So it seemed like a great idea for him to head south. But ultimately, the young man wanted to talk about something else, the extension of the contract. It seemed to him that this was an excellent offer and news. Sarara wanted to know how much the man wanted to extend their contract. If you think about it, at least for another year, and then we'll see. She didn't want to quit her job for the sake of the twins, but because of the Emperor, it would be better for her to leave. So now she needed time to make decisions. Meanwhile, Isabel was having a wonderful time in the company of several ladies, but they didn't interest him much, as he saw Sarara leaving the palace, approximately 83 characters. Since the girl seemed upset, he decided to ask his cousin for answers, approximately 72 characters. So during the chess game, He asked an intriguing question about what was happening between Helios and the governess. It's all because Isabel saw the girl walking and looking upset, not even acknowledging his greeting as she passed by. The problem is that the emperor offered the girl to extend the employment contract, but for some reason, she doesn't want to do it. Isabel perfectly understood why the girl didn't want to stay near the emperor, as it would be painful for her to watch him soon marry someone else. To nudge him in the right direction, Isabel proposed a wager. If he won, she would tell the emperor something of great importance to him. Truthfully, Isabel lost this match. Now Helios wanted to hear, ready to listen to his cousin's secret. The emperor's problem is that he doesn't understand what he truly wants, and he constantly holds himself back. It's interesting, but completely unclear. A new day has dawned, and a new task awaits the twins, who still haven't been able to solve the problem they were given. Specifically, the children couldn't decide what to give Isabel as a farewell gift. A cake just wouldn't do for this occasion. Ultimately, they decided it would be best to prepare cards so Isabel could read them and remember them fondly. But that wasn't everything. Rosalind saw that the governess had also prepared a card, but forgot to put it in the box, and it needed to be fixed urgently. After she placed the postcard inside, they packed the box and decorated it with a ribbon. The young man was delighted to receive such a wonderful gift, so he couldn't wait to open the box. He thought there would be some kind of brooch or piece of jewelry inside, but there were postcards. It was very sweet, so the man was grateful to his younger cousins for their kindness. Isabel realized it was the governess's idea, as the children learned to express their love. In truth, he had never received anything like this before, so he felt truly happy. The prince regretted that 2 weeks had flown by so quickly, and it was time to go home, but he had spent this time wisely, watching the drama of love unfold. The young man understood that this girl would have been a perfect match for his cousin, if not for her low social standing. Meanwhile, he decided to make his offer to Sarara, to accompany her to the kingdom of Wan, seeing as her employment contract was practically at its end. The girl assumed that Isabel was offering her a job, but that wasn't entirely the case after all. This way, she will be able to climb the social ladder. Isabel did it not for her cousin, but for herself. Sarara remained silent, only smiling, and said nothing in response to that suggestion. But, you see, she perfectly understood that this young man offered this to all the pretty girls he liked, and, well, that sort of thing just didn't interest her at all. Nevertheless, they thanked each other for the experience they gained over these 2 weeks. As a farewell, the prince kissed the girl's hand, saying that she could come to the kingdom of Van any time, and he'll always wait for her himself. And now he was planning to go and tease His Majesty by showing him a letter from a young lady. But the emperor was talking to Lady Clocks, and it was clearly a complex conversation. The girl thought that since the man invited her to the ball and danced the first dance with her, it meant something. In Helios's understanding, everything was completely the opposite. It was a beautiful political move, but nothing more than that. This knocked the ground out from under the Duchess. She hadn't expected the emperor to play with someone else's feelings and heart. She then stood up abruptly and prepared to leave. A new day arrived, and the twins were happy they would soon go to the emperor's villa in the south. They were filled with anticipation, as they had never seen the ocean in their lives. It turned out that last night, at 2 a.m., the children were excited because Helios had told them about the upcoming trip. The children looked at her with the eyes of Shrek's cat, clearly wanting something from her. They kindly asked the girl not to give them any homework while they were off on their little trip. The girl understood her contract was ending right around this time, so she announced there would be no homework for them. Evening arrived, and Helios came to put the twins to bed, who were waiting for him to read them a story. Tucking the children into bed, he promised that on vacation they would do all sorts of interesting things they came up with themselves. Then he began to read them a fairy tale, but the fairy tale reading slowly ended, and Helios asked the twins how they would feel if he got married. For some reason, the twins decided their older brother was marrying their governess. But if the young man intends to marry someone other than Sarare, could it really be the red-haired girl he brought to the ball? However, this particular assumption made by Rosalind triggered an uncontrollable outburst of aggression in Ferriton, as he really did not like that woman at all. The children didn't want their older brother to marry anyone but Sarara. To calm down the twins, the man promised that he would never get married. But Rosalind wasn't happy with that option, as her little brother would be sad if they didn't accept his beloved. Still, the girl believed Helios should only marry Sere, 75 characters. But tears wouldn't help the situation, so the princess demanded that the governess accompany them on their journey. It was just difficult to accomplish, plus Helios had to tell the twins something important. The problem is that Sarara will only teach them until August, and then she will leave. A new day dawned, and the children in class looked worse than ever. Sarara didn't know what was wrong, so she tried to cheer them up and find out why they were mad at her. But her outburst only made things worse. Rosalind started shouting that she had a right to be sad. Then she threw the washing machine at the governess. The girl wouldn't tolerate such behavior and demanded immediate explanations. But instead, the children started crying loudly. And then, they really started to hit her with their tiny little fists, shouting that she couldn't treat them so cruelly. Through tears, they tried to persuade her to stay with them and not go anywhere. Turns out Helios told the younger ones they'd get a new teacher in September. Ferritin, however, wanted to see Sarara every day, and for that, she simply had to marry their elder brother. The children didn't understand that it was impossible, but to calm them down a little, the girl suggested creating memories. With this goal in mind, they went to the garden, but the plan failed because it was too hot. To cool the kids down a bit, Sarara went to get some cold lemonade for them. The twins were worried that the girl would soon leave them for good. Suddenly, Rosalind had a brilliant idea on how to prevent this from happening. The maids were watching them and had the worst feelings about what was to come. Meanwhile, Helios toiled tirelessly, approximately 42 characters. And he wasn't pleased with one particular document. He wanted to know who had signed it. Just then, John suddenly heard an unfamiliar noise. He reacted in time, shielding the Emperor with his body from flying debris. The young man quickly scanned the ruler, hoping everything was all right with him. Now he needed to assess the situation. The magical scan of the window's defenses yielded no results. The spells were working correctly. But as soon as Jean looked out the window, everything made sense. Meanwhile, Sarara hurried to the twins with cold lemonade in hand. Helios had reached the children and was clearly very angry. He wanted to know what dirt and stones flew around the palace. The children didn't say much, but the Emperor had plenty to say. He hadn't expected the twins to do such a thing, as they could have seriously injured Jean. At that moment, they burst into tears, which always worked on their older brother. But not this time. He wasn't going to let it go without attention and punishment. Just as she spoke, Sarara rushed over to them. The children immediately complained about Helios, saying he scolded them, while the girl saw the knight's scratched face. Therefore, she believed that the Emperor acted rightly when he scolded them. Ferritin was stunned, not understanding why the governess wasn't comforting them. She had no intention of doing so until the twins apologized to their brother and Jean. They ultimately had to do it, after which Helios began to heal his friend. Rosalind wouldn't stop crying. She just wanted the governess to stay with them. Approximately 83 characters. After that, the twins began to accuse the adults of all the deadly sins in unison. They rushed into their room, shutting out Sararu and Helios, who were trying to get through to them, but truthfully, they didn't understand. So the girl entered the room without permission. But that didn't help. The twins kept getting angry and being fussy. As a result, they crawled back under the blanket, still crying. After a while, they were exhausted and fell asleep. After what he'd been through, Helios hoped Sarara had changed her mind about extending the contract. But she was firm in her decision, so the Emperor offered to travel south with them as a farewell gift for the twins. It was an unexpected offer, and Sarara needed some time to consider it. She required some time to make her decision, but still, she agreed to it. Now it was time to go home. But when the Emperor offered to carry her suitcase, the young woman declined. She didn't want any unnecessary rumors. Nevertheless, Helios was a gentleman and opened the door for her. She didn't understand why he was acting like this, as if he had feelings for her. And then he gently touched her cheek. She had already imagined a kiss, and Helios had simply wiped away the dirt. He just couldn't understand why the girl closed her eyes. Did he accidentally hurt her somehow? But that wasn't the issue. She was lost in her own thoughts. At that moment, the Emperor snatched the bag from her and rushed to the carriage. Meanwhile, the children woke up and saw that everyone had left. Then they got out from under the blanket. It was too hot under there anyway. On one hand, they were happy that Sarara would go with them to the south, but on the other hand, they wanted to cry because they wouldn't see her again. At that moment, Helios entered the room. It pained him to see the twins crying again, holding each other tightly. They needed the comfort they sought from their older brother. Morning arrived, and Sarara came to class, seeing the children who were no longer crying but were happy to see her. Because Helios promised them he'd invite the girl to the palace more often if they behaved well. Together, they could create many happy memories to cherish forever. A new day began, and the kids ran around the castle and played. At that moment, Helios came to them. He was glad the children were no longer crying. But he had an important conversation, so they needed to go to the room. The conversation was about a hunting tournament, and if the twins want to, they can go too. In that case, the young man needed the governess's assistance. The twins were happy that Sarara would accompany them, as this was their first hunting tournament. The kids were happy because they could see either a hare or a squirrel in the woods, or even both at once. Ferritin wished to see a giant deer. It was clear the children had the wrong idea about the hunting tournament, so we needed to make sure they wouldn't be disappointed. After that, the children went to complete their assignments, and the assessment test showed excellent results. The kids were happy with their results and asked the governess for a reward. They wanted to see how Helios would train before going out on the hunt. Since Sarara was ready to give in, they kissed her, then they kissed her again. The children thought their governess was the best. They arrived at the training field seeking the emperor, but he was nowhere to be seen. Here they could play, so Sarara let the children go without worry. Meanwhile, Rosalind found a worm and started to scare Ferritin with it. At that moment, the emperor arrived with his aide and knight. The young man didn't know what the governess and the twins were doing here. Good thing no one bothered anyone, and the emperor, governess, and children rested. Meanwhile, the kids showed off the bracelets that Sarara gave them to their older brother, after which Helios and Jean decided to take the twins for a pony ride. Sarara, however, remained in the clearing with Raphael, who would also be participating in the hunt, though he didn't particularly enjoy the activity. It turns out the emperor isn't thrilled with this event either, and at the tournament, he always aims at the animals in a way that won't kill them. Sarara waited for Helios and the twins to pick her up. She admitted that she missed the little ones very much. In that case, the emperor should prepare a little horse for her so they can all ride together. After that, they began to persuade the governess to take a walk, as they really hoped that a romance would blossom between her and Helios. But she wasn't going to give in to the kids. But Jean was also involved in this chaos, and he persuaded the girl to go for a ride. But the most surprising thing was that Helios was willing to ride with Sarara himself. It was an offer that was impossible to refuse. The man wasn't sure she could ride the horse, so he helped her get on. Now he was ready to put Ferritin on the little horse. The boy had to refuse, as Rosalind was sending him clear signals that he couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, Sararu trembled with fear. She was afraid of heights, and riding horseback felt terrifyingly high, approximately 114 characters. In just a second, Helios was too close, pressing against her back with intensity. His closeness also grated on her frayed nerves, even though he had asked her to relax a little. Therefore, the girl wanted to stop the torment, but Rosalind insisted they keep moving, because riding a horse was no leisurely stroll. It was hard work after all. But seeing that this wasn't working, she started to play on their pity, saying she'd lost her favorite hairpin and that her brother and Sarara had to go find it. Yes, and it's not far to go, just to the edge of the forest. Given the circumstances, the emperor felt his assistants should also participate in the search. But the girl insisted it was unnecessary, and Raphael and Jean should guard them here. Helios didn't suspect a thing and promised to find the hairpin quickly. As soon as the couple disappeared around the bend, Ferritin looked at his sister, realizing she hadn't worn her hairpins today. Meanwhile, Helios tried to understand why he had given in to the twins, given that he had seen the governess was afraid of horses. So at least now he decided to show some involvement and care. It's a good thing that they have almost arrived at the place where Rosalind lost her hairpin. Now you had to keep your eyes peeled to find the item. But Sarara had a choice. She could remain seated on the horse, or she could accept the emperor's help and dismount. The second option appealed to the young woman much more. But at some point something went wrong, and Sarara fell right onto the emperor. Realizing what had happened, the girl recoiled sharply and, embarrassed, began to apologize for what had occurred. And then she ran off altogether, leaving the young man with a rapidly beating heart. They both tried to understand what was happening, why their cheeks burned. Time passed, but the hairpin still refused to be found. But various unwanted thoughts kept trying to creep into the girl's mind. At that moment, the emperor approached her, as it was time for them to go home to avoid the rain. But they didn't make it, as the rain had other plans for them. It was a sign, time to really go, and Helios himself will explain to his sister about the lost hairpin. And imagine his surprise when Sarara hinted that the hairpins might not have been there at all today. But that's a minor detail. The main thing now is to reach the palace, as there's no shelter from the rain here. First, he helped the girl back onto the horse and warned her that he would now jump up behind her. But in order to make the horse gallop, the young man warned Sarara that he would press her close to him for safety. and in just a moment they were racing home. At that pace, they quickly reached the small palace, where assistants and a maid were already waiting for them. They threw towels over them and hid them under umbrellas. But it helped little, as they were soaked to the bone, and they needed to get inside faster, change clothes, so they wouldn't get sick. Sarara followed the emperor, telling herself not to build castles of illusion. After all, Helios cares for her like a younger sister, and there's nothing romantic about their relationship at all. A new day had arrived. The city buzzed with excitement as the hunting labor festival began, and the twins were filled with anticipation too. Each of them dreamed of seeing an unusual animal at the party, but the governess couldn't promise them anything. Because you could find a leopard or a lion, but unicorns are very mysterious creatures, and there are too few of them left in the empire. But Rosalind shouldn't be upset. Maybe next year they'll decide to visit the people's celebration themselves. At that moment, Helios and Jean joined them. Their highnesses immediately asked the brother to catch the animals they wanted. The order is accepted. Now it was time to go hunting. Sarara promised to look after the little ones, so he had nothing to worry about. Time passed. The restless ones in camp were clearly bored. Something similar was what the girl had expected. She herself found it uncomfortable to sit in one place for 3 hours. The problem was that there were no kids at the tournament, except for the serious son of Marquis Brunner, who was hard to play with. Meanwhile, the children started whining, and she had to coax them to be patient a little longer. Suddenly, the crowd roared. His Majesty was returning, but Sarara thought it was better for the little ones to stay away from the crowd. Yes, and the animals will likely be dead and scare children with their appearance. This realization greatly upset their highnesses. To cheer them up a bit, the girl took them to a beautiful clearing in the woods to enjoy the scenery. The forest fascinated them, especially the fly agaric, so Sarara had to reveal its terrifying secret to keep the children from poisoning themselves. This worked. The children stopped reaching for the dangerous mushroom and fled from it far away. Suddenly, the kids found a hurt squirrel. Everyone felt sorry for the squirrel, so she needed help. They brought the animal to the camp, but the problem was that the cub was weak from birth, and now it had also lost a lot of blood, so it didn't have much of a chance. Only a holy power could help in this situation now. At that moment, Helios entered the tent. He was the squirrel's last hope, so the children tearfully begged him to save the little animal. His Majesty immediately began treating the little squirrel. The twins watched the process with rapt attention, and after a few minutes, the animal was cheerful and lively. It was the most wonderful event that happened to the children on this long, tiring day. Sarara was also happy for the twins, as she cared for both them and the animal too. At this moment, the emperor admitted that he was very tired and thought the festival should be cancelled next year. Suddenly, the young man realized he had said too much and tried to fix the situation. But Sarara stopped him in his tracks. Then she handed him a candy, asking him to eat it secretly, away from the twins. It was a sweet, delightful surprise. Helios suddenly realized the girl was comforting him, and it warmed his soul. And so everyone returned home. The children didn't want to let the little squirrel go, saying they had mutual love. But Sarara didn't let them keep the animal at home. It needed to live in the forest with its mom and dad. Even in the room, the little squirrel made such a mess that the kids clearly won't handle it later. However, despite all this, the twins insisted on keeping the animal for themselves. The governess wouldn't budge. The squirrel had chewed all the furniture. The twins were so angry with her, but the girl didn't back down. Also, Helios asked to take the baby squirrel back to the forest so it could return to its parents. So today, during gym class, they'll go to the mountains to release the animal. After a while, they found themselves in the forest, and Sarara chose a perfect spot to release the little squirrel. The children didn't want to say goodbye to the animal, but they had to. At that moment, Rosalind decided they should trick the governess and just pretend they'd let the squirrel go. But Ferriton doubted. He knew that if Sarara and Helios found out about their deception, they would be very angry. But the boy couldn't deny that the animal had become attached to him. Thus began the operation to save and hide the squirrel. At first, Sarara didn't understand what the twins were planning. Yes, there was a strange feeling, but everything else was calm. The children, however, looked suspiciously happy and quiet. This was puzzling, because the twins usually behaved differently and didn't want to learn, but today they were like silk. Yes, and they behaved well at the table, ate everything, and politely asked to go play. What's more, they didn't even wait for dessert. For the 100th time, Sarara was sure something odd was going on. Meanwhile, Helios, knowing that the twins were having lunch, decided to keep them company since the opportunity had arisen. Suddenly, I heard a noise and saw a very interesting sight. Children were running into the garden, and Sarara was watching them carefully. So he also decided to check what was happening. His impulsive move nearly ruined the governess's plan, as Rosalind felt someone was watching them from afar. But neither she nor Ferritin saw anyone, so they continued on, while Sarara remained frozen in the Emperor's embrace. Only when the adrenaline began to fade did the young people realize they